Hey guys, this is Urizi. Part 16 of What If Naruto Was the Son of Apollo. The summer after the quest for Artemis, Naruto has his hands full with guilt, concern and frustration. When Bianca's strange illness takes a turn for the worse, a quest is started. A relationship is strained, a hero returns, and the labyrinth is found. Join Naruto as he begins his quest for the cure and the others dive into the labyrinth. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and also check the author in the description if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 28. So tell us again, Rachel. How exactly did you manage to get us a limousine ride? Kakashi asked, eyeballing Rachel suspiciously. Naruto had been wondering the same thing, but his mind was more focused on the events of nearly a half hour ago, where he and Percy ran into Luke's possessed body. That was jarring as hell, and frankly Naruto was still on a mild autopilot setting. He closed his eyes to focus, filtering through the memories. After they left the labyrinth, they found themselves in the basement of a Colorado Springs visitor center. Kakashi immediately disappeared into the shadows, Naruto catching a few glimpses of him being a vague memory. They split up to look around. Annabeth made an IM call to camp, which was thankfully not under attack yet. Talia and himself, along with Nico, who was guided by Naruto's stern hand clamped onto the boy's shoulder, got some food for the group, and Rachel and Percy returned with promise of a ride. Frankly, Naruto was surprised that Annabeth volunteered to go alone, but he doubted she was truly alone since he hardly saw Kakashi or sensed a henge in use. The red-headed girl squirmed under the human Cyclops' lone eye, peering at her from behind the sanctuary of his book. Feeling a bit sympathetic, since he had been under the gaze several times himself, Naruto put his hand on Kakashi's book, a testament to how much the man trusted him, and pushed it down, giving him a small look as he did. Sighing, Kakashi did as he was silently requested to do and closed the book, putting it in his back pouch securely before pressing his fingers together in thought as he gave Rachel an accusatory look. "Look, Rachel, we won't judge you and we won't force you to talk," Naruto said calmly. "It's just, shinobi and demigods always get the short end of the stick when it comes to favors given without reason. One time it almost cost me a finger," Kakashi said, looking at his pinky on his left hand. "Literally. For payment. Gross," Naruto said, and Kakashi shrugged. He still had his pinky, so that meant there was an alternative method of currency. Or he just incapacitated the guy. Who could tell? "We nearly got stretched to death in a waterbed shop," Percy said, Annabeth shuddering at the memory. "I just met most of you today, so forgive me if I want to keep some things secret," Rachel said. Naruto nodded in understanding, leaning back and letting his arm rest on Talia's shoulders while she got a small nap in. Car rides were usually boring for a while before something fun happened. What the hell is Dash?" their driver shouted before the sound of glass breaking caught their ears. Naruto braced himself and sent a pulse of chakra through the floor of the limo, keeping everyone safely in their seats without banging around like ragdolls. The car landed on its wheels, the riders all awake if they weren't before and clinging to whatever they could. Once he was sure they came to a stop, Kakashi made a Rasengan of his own, thrusting it into the roof and blowing a large hole in it. Naruto was going to tell him that the doors probably worked, but hey, rooftops were more fun anyway. He and Naruto climbed out first, them being the only two without seatbelts. Kakashi was a ninja and Naruto was not going to be restrained in it if he didn't have to be, and scoured the immediate area. Kakashi investigated the driver while Naruto helped the group out of the limo. As he helped Nico out the door, Kakashi made a displeased noise. "Well, whoever killed poor Roger, right?" he asked Rachel, who shook her head with a pale face. "Robert. Oh. Well, whoever killed Robert didn't mind leaving a calling card. I think it's for you. Goody, more fan mail," Naruto said dryly as he caught the strange kunai Kakashi tossed to him. The handle was normal as was the ring at the base, but it was the blade that was strange. It was curved like a river until the third inch, where it became pointed like a regular kunai, making Naruto furrow his brow. "I've actually never seen a kunai like this before." "I have," Kakashi said with a scowl. "Iwagakure no Sato. That Tsuchikage might be a little dumbass, but I doubt he's stupid enough to send assassins after me after I agreed to be a high-ranking official in the Alliance," Naruto said, looking at the bloody knife with a frown. He looked around. They were near a forest. Naruto felt a tug at his chakra and sent a small pulse. There was another urgent tug and Naruto's eyes went wide. "It's time," he said. He dashed into the woods, leaving the group behind as he ran. "Naruto, wait!" Percy cried out. He looked to Kakashi. "Where's he going?" "I don't know," Kakashi said, frowning. "He's moving too fast for you all to follow." "I could, but I'm not leaving you to fend for yourselves. We can handle ourselves," Taliah said, annoyed. Kakashi chuckled and gave her a smile as he wiped the blood off the strange kunai onto his leg. "Just like my genin, back when they were all cute and innocent." Before Taliah could retort, Kakashi lifted the strange kunai up to his thumb and sliced it open. His hands blurred through seals, so fast that Percy was sure that a finger snapped in and out of place. He finished with his hands clapped together. "Kuchios no Jutsu," Kakashi said, slamming his hand onto the cement ground. There was an explosion of smoke that had the teens covering their faces. When they dropped their arms, Kakashi was patting the head of a rather large pug wearing a headband like Kakashi and a blue vest with a strange smiley face on it. The ninja was holding the knife in front of the pug's nose. "Mind sniffing him out for us, Pakken? And when you run, run at a civilian pace." "Yeah, I got the scent. Changed a lot though. Smells like fire and ramen, there's also a hint of crisping air," a deep-grown man's voice said. Looking closer they saw it was the pug that spoke, turning to look at them with dark brown eyes. "What the hell are you brats all looking at?" "That's a talking pug," Percy said. A satyr understanding what a dog said was one thing, but a dog speaking English, rather fluently mind you, was a whole new ballgame. "Yes he is," Kakashi said with his strange eye smile. His hand patted the pug on the head. "Pakken, meet Naruto's friends." "Naruto's friends, meet Pakken." "My summon Ninken." "S summon?" Annabeth asked. A pact right? Between the animals and shinobi?" "Yep. Chakra/blood pact," Kakashi said, scratching Pakken behind the ear. "Oh yeah, right there, that's the spot," Pakken said. He quickly got to business once Kakashi stopped. He lifted his paw up and coughed into it. "Yes, well, I've got Naruto's scent. Wherever he's going there fast. Wonder why he didn't just teleport?" Percy asked Annabeth quietly. "Maybe he's not thinking straight," Annabeth said in return. Taliah snorted, overhearing their conversation. "Of course he's not. He just ran off without another word. It's T.I. Her eyes widened and she looked at the dog. "What are you doing standing around for? We need to move, now." "Taliah, what's the urgency?" Annabeth asked. "Do you remember, Annie? When his eyes would turn yellow and he'd gain some makeup?" Taliah asked. She looked to Percy. "What is under attack all the time and not even the gods can stop it if they tried?" Percy frowned. "Fate? Grover, Percy, think of Grover," Taliah said, sounding frustrated. "Pan!" Annabeth and Percy exclaimed as one, their eyes wide. Kakashi frowned and looked to Pakken. "Find him," the shinobi said. "Now." The dog nodded and led them into the forested area off the road. They ran, Rachel keeping a good pace with them. Pakken led them through woodland, ducking left and right. The strange serpentine pattern Naruto took had them running around trees and bushes, many of them looking like they had run in circles until finally they came across a cave. They entered the cave, slowly, quietly. Percy found a Rasta cap, just like the one Grover always wore, and held onto it as they walked. Faintly they heard voices. As they got closer it got louder. Finally they came across the chamber where a nervous large cyclops watched the normally pacifistic satyr push Naruto against the wall. "You should have told us," Grover said. His back was to them, but they could tell he was barely holding on from crying. He tightened his grip on Naruto's shirt. "Why? Why didn't you say anything?" "The satyrs had to find him, Grover," Naruto said softly, gently as he slowly disentangled the satyr's hands from his shirt. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to, Grover. I wanted to tell you ever since last winter, when we were standing right above him." "You, gods damn you, Naruto!" Grover shouted again, pushing the taller blonde into the wall before crumpling to his knees. "Damn you, they already have." Naruto said under his breath, looking up and meeting eyes with his large group. Found me? Hey Pakken. Hey kid. Pakken said, waving his paw at the boy. He looked at Kakashi. Summon me later, I get the feeling I'd be unwanted here. The pug vanished in an explosion of smoke. G-man. Percy said, walking forward and putting his hand on the satyr's shoulder. Percy, I found him, I found Pan. Grover said, looking happy despite the light sheen of tears in his eyes. Percy gave him a smile. I told you that you would. Are you ready to meet him? Naruto asked, getting the two boys to look at him. His smile looked hollow. Because he's been waiting to be found for years. Grover swallowed before nodding, getting to his hooked feet and patting the concerned Tyson on the arm. He led the way through the crystal-like doorway, the large group followed him, Kakashi holding up the end with Rachel. Then they came to the large chamber filled with animals long thought dead. That's a woolly mammoth. Percy said under his breath. Annabeth nudged him and his gaze went to the ancient satyr sitting on a slab of mossy stone around which the animals were gathered. His eyes were the same blue as Luke's, minus all the crazy, and his hair and beard were a curly white, almost like snow. His goat-like legs had graying fur on them and his body, while in peak condition due to his godly status, looked frail. His horns were far too large to be hidden by a rustic cap like Grover's. It was then it hit Percy. He was looking at Pan. Lord Pan. Grover breathed, falling to his knees again. The god smiled. Grover, my brave satyr, I've been waiting for you. Sorry. Grover apologized out of habit. I got lost. He laughed and the newcomers felt the same feeling when a springtime breeze washed over them. It was followed by the feeling of hope, filling the cavern to the brim as the god's laugh echoed in the cavern. Kakashi knelt, his head bowed, not deeming himself worthy of looking at the god while the kids joined him, their eyes locked on the god in awe. I needed that. Pan said, wiping a tear from his eye. He patted the dodo on its head. The last good laugh I got was from Didi, here. The dodo looked affronted at that. Pan sighed and his eyes met Grover. I know what you are going to ask, Grover Underwood, and it is with a heavy heart that I tell you I cannot go. But we need you. Grover said, looking confused and depressed all at once. To save the wild. To stop humanity from destroying it, dear boy. Pan said, still smiling sadly. He beckoned Grover closer and he came, putting his hand on the satyr's head, rubbing the curly locks. You are so pure-hearted, Grover. So full of life and love for my realm and all that fall under it. I chose well. See chose? Grover asked. My lord, I don't understand. Pan continued to smile sadly. The wild above is dying and gone, Grover. Nothing can change that except humanity. There are a few groups dedicated to it, I hear, but they need the guidance only a satyr can give. But this place is one of the last true sanctuaries that remain of my realm. Pan said. The last of a few pockets, and it will not last forever. Before anyone could ask what that meant, Pan's image flickered, turning to smoke and vanishing for a moment before reappearing. He looked haggard and exhausted, his surrounding animals all giving looks of concern to the god. Pan coughed into his hand, ichor caking it. He paid it no mind, giving another weary smile to Grover. As you can see, Grover, nothing lasts. This old rusted thing, Pan gestured to his chest where a human heart would be if he were mortal, is running on fumes. He's dying. Nico said finally, quietly and under his breath. He closed his eyes, swallowing hard before giving the harsh truth. He should have been dead by now. The will of life makes any man strong. Naruto said softly. Pan nodded. Well said, cousin of mine. Thank you for keeping the secret. You swore him to secrecy? Grover asked. Naruto had told him he knew, but this was too much. I did. After all, what was the point of putting my faith in you if you got a map? Pan asked wryly. I had sent word to my father, keeping him from finding me of course, to give word to Hades. Hades sent Naruto in his stead, acting as an ambassador and giving me a promise of prolonging so long as Hades was kept up to date on my lifespan. Hence the handsome figure there. Pan gestured to the skeleton glued to the one part of the room that had nothing but dead flowers around it. When I met him, I met someone who knew death, life and found balance in nature. A teaching I learned in my first life was given to me again as a gift of thanks. Naruto said, his jaw clenching from where he knelt next to Taliah. A mortal sage, alive and well, possibly the last of his kind. Pan said with a few coughs. He is my champion of mortals, but I need a true heir. Pan, my name means all, so I couldn't have just one heir. I needed everyone to know, everyone to take a bit of their life and protect the wild. I tried millennia ago with Lisa's, to spread the word. Annabeth's eyes widened. That legend is true, the sailor heard a voice off the coast of Ephesos cry out to him. Tell them the great god Pan is dead. No. But gods can't die. Grover said. They fade. Naruto said solemnly. Becoming one with the primordials they originally came from. Chaos. And order. Pan said with a nod. I am ready. I need my message to be passed, my call to be heard. Will you answer my call, Grover Underwood? I can't. Grover said, his cheeks caked in tears while he tried to stay strong. So stubborn. Pan said with a light-hearted chuckle. Every satyr I've ever met, always so stubborn and loyal. The wild is too small and shattered for one god to heal. Grover, try to understand. It is in the hands of mortals now, but again, they need guidance. Answer my call, Grover, if but to perform a last request from this old god. Grover couldn't speak, he just nodded. Tears trailed from his eyes that if left unchecked would flood the cave. The others were no better. Taliah was holding strong, if barely, and Nico was crying just as hard as Grover was. Percy's own eyes felt misty, and it was when the jubilant blue orbs of the god met his green that he felt the first tear run down his cheek. Percy Jackson, a boy with so much weight on his shoulders. All that responsibility and you hold strong. Pan said. That is your power, your will of endurance outlasts even Atlas. I give you this news, though the darkest moment be upon you, you will not feel fear. Percy nodded, unable to say anything as Pan looked to the blonde girl next to him. Annabeth Chase, as wise as your mother in some cases, and then wiser in others. Your role has not been filled yet, and it will not be an easy role to take. But you have a role, nonetheless, even if it isn't the role you want. Pan said to her. Annabeth nodded, a tear streaking down her cheek as she did. Pan's blue eyes locked on the single-eyed son of Poseidon. Tyson, heroes come in all sizes, and many are forgotten, but your name will be legendary among Cyclopes for generations to come. He looked to Nico while Tyson cried, the Cyclops being consoled by the white-haired shinobi through a hand rubbing his arm. Young master of shadows, so much potential, so much anger. Pan said, making Nico blink as he looked at him. Do not fall victim to your father's flaw, and you, Nico D'Angelo, shall be the next great hero of Camp Half-Blood. Nico pondered his words while Pan looked to Taliah. Strong is the word that describes you, daughter of Zeus. You will need this strength, the wall of iron that separates you from your friends. A dark time will come once more and your lightning will be the only way to illuminate your path. You will hold strong. Pan said, making Taliah nod as she finally let a tear roll out of her eye. His eyes drifted again, overlooking Naruto and landing on Rachel. Rachel Elizabeth Dare. He said, making the crying girl stiffen. Your father's name does not rule you, for your role shall be the most important after all is said and done. You will change lives for years to come. Stay true to yourself. Rachel nodded. Pan's eyes then finally locked with the air of Helios. My friend. My cousin. My champion. Pan said, Naruto straightening up as Pan said the word with pride. Teach them. Guide them as you have. Be warned, Naruto. A day will come where you must choose, and while one choice will lead you to a happier life, that life will be shorter in the outcome. How do you see all this? Naruto asked, his voice breaking. I am closer to order and chaos than the fates ever were. I see exactly where you go. Your choices will have you hated, your friendships will be strained, but you will press on just as you always have. Whereas Percy Jackson has the endurance of Atlas, you have the willpower that could topple any immortal. Zeus, Kronos, or Uranus. Pan's words had Naruto kneeling before him in pride. The god smiled gently, looking over to Grover. It is time. He said. I need you to do one other thing for me, Grover. What? Grover asked weakly. Release me. Pan said. Let go, but never forget. I can't. You can. Pan said, so sure of his statement that the whole room felt the same way about Grover. You are the one satyr who believed in me more than any other. You alone have the best chance to change the way mortals, demigod or not, view the wild. You, Grover Underwood, are my legacy. The satyr looked into the smiling Pan's eyes, seeing nothing but faith in them. Grover smiled back and got to his hooves. He approached the seated god. Never. Grover promised, standing tall and strong. I will never let you be forgotten. I will let you rest. He put his hand on top of Pan's head. I release you, Lord Pan. Pan smiled as his image faded away. Thank you. A burst of warm energy exploded from where he once sat, encasing all 8 of the guests. Naruto inhaled the remaining lingering scent of wildflowers and saved the memory of his interactions, brief though they were, with his favorite cousin. The room was quiet as the remaining animals that lingered behind with Pan quietly turned to dust, Didi the dodo trilling a hum as she did, or shriveled up and died. The skeleton embedded in the wall gave a cruel cackle before it crumpled to the ground, being reabsorbed into the underworld. We should go. Naruto said after a minute, getting to his feet. He didn't dry his eyes. Pan's death deserved tears, for the world lost a great person. Even if they didn't know it. Yeah. Grover quietly agreed. He turned and met Naruto's eyes, both pairs red from crying. We need to tell everyone the news, the great god Pan is dead. Behind Pan's mossy stone was a door back into the labyrinth that immediately shut and crumpled apart after they all walked through. Rachel led them, her eyes still wet. Kakashi pulled Naruto to the back of the group, leaving Taliah to talk to Grover about their own quest and the adventures Grover and Tyson had. What now? Kakashi asked. The god of the wild is dead. Pan lives on. Naruto said, his eyes glued on the back of Grover's head. Grover was the closest to him when he was released, but he didn't get all of Pan's godly abilities. Perhaps some of the more satyr-based powers, but not all of them. How can you be sure? Naruto looked at Kakashi, his eyes glowing with amusement. Helios was the god of sight, Kakashi-sensei. I see. No. Not like I do. Naruto said, looking back at Grover with a faint smile. He'll do what Lisa's couldn't. He'll tell the world that Pan is dead, and he'll save the wild. They exited the labyrinth in Times Square. Percy managed to secure 4 Pegasi in an alley while Naruto and Taliah decided to take Soul back, Nico getting dragged back over to it despite his desire to ride a Pegasus, since it was parked nearby. Naruto gave Rachel a tri-pronged kunai. You've got a good throwing arm, keep it close. Also, don't use it like a brush. Not as effective. Before bidding them farewell, Naruto drove Soul back at the highest speed before stopping right outside where the barrier began. Why'd you stop? Taliah asked, giving her boyfriend a curious look. Well, Kakashi, moment of truth. He said, ignoring her. Next to Nico on the left, the space shimmered before Kakashi appeared in a poof of smoke, crossing his arms. I have to hoof it. I want to see if my concern is valid. Naruto said. Kakashi nodded and got out of the car, Nico blinking in shock. That was awesome. He said. I can learn how to do that, too, right? In the shadows. Naruto said. He watched Kakashi walk up to where the barrier was and push his hand against it. There was obvious strain, but Kakashi was able to force himself through, which had Naruto gritting his teeth in annoyance. I knew it. What? Taliah asked. And why was he camouflaged? He doesn't like seatbelts. I don't like tickets. Naruto answered before slowly driving in as Chiron was seen galloping to the top of the hill. And I was right. Chakra disrupts boundaries. What do you mean? Think of the boot camp. Naruto said. He ignored Nico's confused blink and elaborated. They followed us there, why would they not be able to get here where there's another boundary god? Naruto got out of the car and walked through with ease, walking up alongside Kakashi as Chiron trotted down to them with his bow in hand. Mr. Uzumaki. Just what on earth is going on? Chiron asked, giving Kakashi a mild look of concern. He's cool, Chiron, he's with me. Naruto said, patting the shinobi's shoulder. Just testing the defenses against abnormal mortals. Clear-sighted? Chiron asked. Shinobi. Chiron blinked before looking at Kakashi, who was looking back at the centaur with his Sharingan eye. A strange disease you have there. One could say the same about you. Kakashi said in a relaxed tone. I believe they call it mythological creature syndrome. You must be Kakashi Hatake. Chiron said, nodding. Naruto's enjoyed comparing the two of us. Usually it's the fact that both of us promote unity amongst our groups. Those who break the rules are trash, but those who leave their comrades and precious people behind are worse than trash. Kakashi said. He offered the centaur his hand. I've heard good things about you, Chiron. And we both share the same teacher. Chiron arched a brow before nodding in understanding. Yes. A bit eccentric, but we've all got our quirks. Naruto snorted at the understatement, but the two students of Apollo ignored him. Kakashi's eyes closed and he took his hand back. I understand you're looking for a close-quarters teacher. Chiron blinked. Normally we wouldn't seek outside assistance and promote from within, but I believe a soldier of war such as yourself would be a welcome asset. Come with me, I would like to speak more about this matter in the big house. Naruto, get your car back to Cabin 9's garage and get some armor on. We're on full alert. Naruto snapped to attention. Yes, sir. Suck up. Bite me, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto tightened the guard over his shin and then grabbed his chest piece, pulling it out from underneath Ranger's paw. The giant cat gave a disgruntled look at that. He was comfortable leaning on the golden plate. Thank you very much. Naruto just gave him a grin and scratched him on the side of his head. Sorry, Range. I need this more than you do. He said. He finished putting his armor on, pulling his Jonin flak jacket on for added padding and grabbed a clips off in its disguised form. Naruto slipped it into his pocket and grabbed his bow from where it rested leaning against the wall. He collapsed it, clipping it to his belt and then slung his quiver over him. Naruto turned and beckoned for Ranger to follow him. Come on Range, let's go see if Leo finished your armor. The big cat got up and stretched before hopping down from the bed with a creak. Ranger rubbed himself against Naruto, almost making the blonde stumble back. Instead he chuckled and scratched the saber tooth behind the ear. He led Ranger out of Cabin 13 and over to Cabin 9, nodding at Kakashi while the shinobi answered Malcolm's questions about Konoha and other villages. He smiled at Annabeth as she pet and cooed at Pakin, who was growling at the glaring Washington, the giant cat decked out in armor that would make Battlecat jealous. Ah, gringo. 'Bout time you got here. Leo said, grinning as he lifted his welding mask up. He walked away from his workbench over to another one covered by a tarp. Ready to see Ranger's gear? He yanked it off before Naruto could answer, far too giddy to hold back the surprise any longer. Tada! Wow, Leo! Naruto said. He picked the bronzed armor up and looked it over. It looks like my chariot. Yeah, Piper helped me out with that. Leo said with a prideful grin as he picked the helmet for the cat up. Check it, based it off of Battle Cat from Toonami. Bronze and 2 spikes for all the masculine testosterone running through our bodies. Great job, Leo. Naruto said, holding the sun-marked shoulder guard for Ranger. He put it on the giant cat, getting a deep indignant meow for his efforts. You're guarding the wounded and Bianca, Range, you need as much protection as you can get. Ranger gave a reluctant meow and stood tall while Leo and Naruto fully prepped him. When they were done, Ranger looked like a gift from Ria to her grandson or nephew. The ancient cat gave a mighty roar and Naruto scratched him under the chin. There's a good boy. See? Didn't take that long, now did it? Naruto asked, getting loud purrs from Ranger. He grinned at Leo. Not bad. Making me a sort of Grayskull, too? Funny, gringo. Real funny. Leo said, waving him off. Now get out of here so I can make more oil bomb traps. Yeah, alright. I gotta go drop this lug off. Naruto said, patting the saber-tooth on the head. Make sure you're at the catapults in 10. We need to be ready. Yeah. Leo waved him off. He would be there, Naruto was sure of it. This was the one place where Leo truly felt at home. He'd be on the front lines fighting with his life on the line to protect it. And don't use that axe you think I don't know that you're making, Gimli. Naruto said over his shoulder. I can use whatever weapon I feel like, Legolas. Leo shouted back. A few short minutes later, Naruto left Ranger to defend the wounded and recovering, where Bianca was stationed since she was limited to a wheelchair, but she still had geokinesis at her disposal. He was walking towards a group huddle involving the head of the Cloven Elders, Grover, Percy and Chiron. He saw the elder's face turn red and hear shouting of sacrilege and blasphemy. Guess he didn't like hearing the truth, and frankly, Naruto didn't blame him. Chronos' possession of Luke combined with the death of Pan made for a grim day, and Naruto was still trying to come to terms with both. Resurrecting Chronos was one thing, but to willingly take him in and be his host? Luke was worse off than Naruto originally believed, so he's not only a traitor but he's batshit insane. Helios said. Wonderful. We're fighting a madman, you get used to it. Naruto thought with a nonchalant shrug. The elder stormed off, calling Grover a disgrace as he left to prepare the satyrs for the fight, and Naruto walked up, putting a hand on Grover's shoulder. Don't listen to him, Grover. You remember what Pan said, satyrs are stubborn. Yeah, I don't know how I'll be able to do this alone. Grover said, his shoulders slumping. Percy gave him a light punch in the arm. You're not alone, G-Man, Percy said, giving his best friend a grin. We'll just have to find a way to convince him. Thanks, Percy. Grover said, giving his friend a grin in return. I give my deepest apologies, Grover, but I must check the rest of the defenses. Chiron said, getting a nod from the three before he galloped off. Nico ran up to them just after Chiron galloped off, ducking behind Naruto. Hide me, hide me, hide me. From what? Naruto asked, trying to get Nico to let go of him. Nico, damn it, let go, I need to be able to. Nico D'Angelo. You are so grounded, young man. Percy watched as Naruto turned pale. In a quick movement, Naruto spun around, picked Nico off the ground and held him in the air, shaking him. What did you do? I figured we could use some help and I don't know, she was the first one that came to mind. Put me down and hide me before she finds me and makes me run around the sticks. Nico said, whimpering. Hide you? I should hand you over to get the brunt of the punishment. Naruto hissed. Then I can hightail it to the other side of the camp. I haven't talked to her in 6 months. The voice of a calm woman said pleasantly. Percy and Grover looked to the speaker as Naruto froze in place. Hair the deepest shade of red they had ever seen cascaded down from her head, well over her back. She was fair-skinned and had a headband that was similar to Kakashi's, though instead of a leaf she had only a spiral. Two amethyst-colored eyes bored into the back of Naruto's head, occasionally meeting Nico's terrified onyx ones. She wore a light, tank top-like iron-plated armor over a black shirt that clung to her like a second skin, the same plated armor on her forearms and shins, similar to Naruto's own armor, but with a red spiral instead of a Greek sun. On her back was a sword similar to Kakashi's, but again, it had a red spiral on the handle. Naruto-kun, why don't you turn around now? The woman asked. Hi. Naruto said, spinning around and setting Nico in front of him, fully prepared to use the boy as a meat shield. Percy looked between the two and noted that Naruto's face looked more like hers than what Apollo looked like. Green eyes widened as he put it together. You're Naruto's mom. He said bluntly, getting both Uzumaki and Nico to look at him. The woman beamed. Yes, I am. Kushina Uzumaki at your service, Databane. Kachin, you're tick. What's that, Naruto-kun? You saying something? Kushina asked, arching a thin brow at her son's voice. No, Kachin. Naruto said, his mouth clicking shut audibly. Kushina nodded. That's what I thought. She said, her gaze going down to Nico. And you, mister. What did your father say about talking to the spirits of the dead? Not to. Nico said quietly. And what did you do? Talk to spirits. What do you think we should do about that? Let me go with a stern warning. Whack. Ow. Thank you, Naruto-kun. You're still in trouble, though. Hi, Kachin. Naruto said, his head hanging. Percy watched in amazement as the woman ripped Nico a new one. Isn't it illegal to threaten your kids with feeding them to a dog? Percy asked Grover quietly. It's not specifically a law, so, technically. Grover said in return. That's so messed up. Percy said, feeling horrible for Nico. Am I understood? Kushina asked, her eyes narrowed at Nico, who looked smaller than a fly after the chewing out he got. Yes, Kushina. Nico said. Kushina nodded. Good. She said. Her eyes then went to her son, who swallowed, and she glared at him. 6 months? Really? I've been busy. Naruto said sheepishly. Faster than Percy had ever seen, Kushina's sword had been drawn and the blunt side of it hit the top of Naruto's head. Hard. Naruto crumpled to the ground. He was groaning as he held his bruised crown while getting back to his feet. But I was. He said. That's still no excuse. Kushina said stubbornly. Her eyes narrowed at the flak jacket. And this? Promotion? Kushina scrutinized him with a hard glare before she beamed and pulled the taller teen into a bone-crushing hug. My Sochi's a chunin. Finally. Took you a decade, but you did it, Databane. Commander actually. Naruto groaned out. That only seemed to increase the pressure and Percy winced at the sound of cracking. Kachin, camp, attack, stop, oops. Sorry, Sochi. Kushina said as she let him go. She gave him a smile and cupped his cheeks. I'm so proud of you. Naruto flushed a bit at that. Kachin, oh hush. I'm your mother, I'm so allowed to embarrass you. 10 months I carried you around, I can do whatever I want as far as I'm concerned. Kushina said, smirking at him. Percy wondered what she meant by 10 months before shrugging it off. Naruto must have just been a stubborn baby. Kushina looked at the green-eyed boy and the satyr. So, Sochi, who are your friends? Oh, right. Naruto said, looking at them. Kachin, this is Grover Underwood, satyr extraordinaire and the Lord of the Wild. But I'm not Dash. Ah, so you're the one that found him. Kushina said, her head nodding in understanding. Lady Persephone sends her regards. Thank you. Grover said nervously. Kushina let her eyes land on Percy's face before she snapped her fingers. You're Sally's boy. Percy, right? Why, you know my mom. Percy asked. Oh yes. I met her a few weeks ago at lunch. We both made a habit of meeting up and talking about our work. Of course she thinks I'm a cashier at a flower shop, but I think she suspects something. Kushina said, shrugging. Anyway, she's told me all about you, Percy. Personally, I think my favorite story is that time you refused to take a bath for a week. Percy looked horrified while Grover and Nico snickered. Naruto refused to say anything, lest his mom tell Percy about any of his embarrassing history. Kushina opened her mouth to begin recounting it when the horn sounded. Lock shields. Clarice shouted a distance away. What's going on? Kushina asked. War. Naruto said. He, Percy, Grover and Nico drawing their weapons and running off to fight. Kushina ran after them to join into the fight. It was worse than ever imagined. Cabin 9's catapults were bombarding giants and Cabin 5 was holding off the smaller forces as best they could. Naruto rushed to the front lines, slicing and shooting monsters alternatively. He was blindsided by something large colliding into his side, pulling him away from the enemy forces and closer to the south side of Zeus' fist. Naruto groaned as he shook off the daze he got from the attack. Finally. A deep raspy voice chuckled before something landed atop Zeus' fist. Vengeance will be mine. W.H. Sasuke? Naruto asked, looking at the shadowed figure as he rubbed his head. Oh, that's very close. A scaled foot stepped down into the moonlight and cracked reptilian lips parted with a raspy chuckle. Covered in brown, black and dark yellow scales was the Uchiha, his hair was gone, but Naruto knew it was him from the eyes. The scara of the creature's eyes were a murky yellow, and the red Sharingan orbs glared at him with nothing but hate. The now snake-like Uchiha stood at an intimidating 6 feet, his arched feet adding a few inches to his height, and a 5-foot-long tail swished around behind him. Sasuke's pants were shredded above the knees and his normally man-cleavage revealing shirt was absent, possibly due to the large wings sprouting from his back. I've waited an eternity for this, son of Apollo. The raspy deep voice said. His scaled hands came to life with static electricity and the crocodile smile spread across his face. Eons ago your father killed me days after his birth, now I take vengeance on him by killing his favorite son. Naruto's eyes widened. Python. Chapter 29. Talia Grace was pissed. She sent a bolt of lightning at a Dracini, the snake-like woman hissing as it avoided the blast. The daughter of Zeus was persistent, though, and a bit crafty. That wasn't the case prior to the quest for Artemis. Talia was a for sure daughter of Zeus, point weapon at enemy, fire lightning, boom, problem solved. Ever since she and Naruto became a couple though, her fighting style changed. Talia was more efficient than ever with her spear, nearly an ace shot with a bow. Those last few centimeters to dead center would be conquered, and she could recreate an attack that was created by the arguably goofiest of her immortal half-brothers, the Rasengan. The wind gathered in her palm as the Dracini came in close to impale her with the spear in its hand. Talia let a grin quirk up and she brought the condensed ball of rotating air to the snakewoman's face. It was like using a grinder on metal, only after a half second, the metal went flying, taking down at least 8 trees as it did. Talia smirked even wider, the ball still going in her hand, and impulsively charged it with her static. The ball started to grow, and alarmed, Talia tossed it at the nearest enemy. That Laestrygonian giant didn't need its head anyway, right? I just made a sticky bomb. Talia said, looking at her hand and then out to the forces that were charging at the camp's defenses. She bounced into action, a gleeful smile on her face. This battle was so over. Percy Jackson was determined to win. He scowled as he pulled his sword out of the Dracini's stomach with a jerk. The campers were barely holding out. He'd just helped Juniper and Grover douse Juniper's burning tree and was cutting through the waves of enemies, mostly monsters so far. That was to change, as an enemy demigod ran at him. His name was Todd, unclaimed, or a minor god's kid, and took residence a few years back at Cabin 11. He'd been there when Percy went on his lightning bolt quest. He was gone the year after. Percy Jackson. I'll be a hero to the cause if I kill you, Todd said. He raised a nasty-looking sword that looked like something out of Blackbeard's arsenal. It was curved and jagged at the top, looking like the definition of evil sword. Riptide clanged against the new sword and Percy's green glared into Todd's piercing blues. They were hardened and ready for battle, determined to kill. Todd pulled back and slashed at Percy, the son of Poseidon stepping back and avoiding it. Todd continued this, using different methods to attack with each slash and swing of his sword while Percy either deflected or dodged, trying to keep from actively engaging in battle with enemy half-bloods. Stop running from me, Todd said, looking very upset at the thought. He pulled back and his sword separated into two. Percy had to gape at that for a moment. Dual-wielding swords wasn't unheard of in spars, but it was for a moment. This kid was swinging like crazy, practically dancing with his swords as he attacked Percy. Finally Todd swept Percy's feet out from under him after he failed to get a cut across Percy's neck. Percy landed on his back with a grunt. His hand holding Riptide was stepped on, Todd holding the two swords like scissors at Percy's neck. The night is mine. I will kill you and my father will realize that he should have claimed me long ago. Not ignored me just because I wasn't bulky like the others, Todd said, and Percy saw who the teen's father was from the look in his eyes. Ares. Todd had his cruel and sadistic smile and oily black hair. That was it though. Everything else was pretty average. Now die and bring us victory. Pass, Percy said, pulling his free hand out from under Todd's foot and punching up, right between the legs. Todd's eyes crossed and he stumbled back. Percy brought Riptide up only to graze Todd's face, but his aim was lower than he expected. Riptide sliced Todd's throat. The son of the war god was clutching at it, his swords fallen to the ground next to his legs. The blood covered Todd's hands and Percy felt it sink in. The death of another, one of them, was on his hands. He watched the life leave Todd's eyes, staring at the body before scooting away. Get up, Mark, another son of Ares, said as he hoisted Percy to his feet. Good kill. Now let's find another giant. But, he was. It doesn't matter who he was, Mark said coldly. He's the enemy. You killed him. End of story. Percy didn't like that. Todd was a demigod who just wanted to be accepted for who he was. To be acknowledged by his father. It was understandable why he was rebelling, especially given Ares' violent tendencies, but he didn't have to die. Percy let Todd's name etch itself into his mind as he numbly ran off to fight another monster. Annabeth Chase was planning. Aim for the legs, Malcolm said next to Annabeth, his sword slicing through one of the Dracini's snake-like trunk of a leg. The monster fell to her side and her head was swiftly sliced off. She collapsed into golden dust, along with several others of her kind felled by Cabin 6 members. Annabeth drove her dagger into the side of the Dracini she faced, quickly pulling it out and slashing it deep across the left leg. The Dracini cried out in rage as it fell to the ground, allowing Annabeth to stab it in the head. She pulled her dagger out and sheathed it, reaching into her pouch for throwing knives. She tossed them at the archer, aiming a fire arrow at the trees where the Dryads and Apollo's cabin were perched. It hit his hand, making him drop his bow to the ground. An arrow came from the trees and hit him square between the eyes, Annabeth watching as the body slumped to the ground. Annabeth looked to the shooter, spotting Lee Fletcher draw another arrow and take another enemy demigod out with an arrow to the back, most likely piercing a lung. She threw a knife at the demigod's head, mercifully killing the poor girl so she wouldn't die slowly or in pain. The weight fell in her pouch once more and she pulled 2 more knives out, flipping them around in her hand as she turned to the other direction, throwing them at the 2 Dracini, nailing both in the eyes. Annabeth Chase was planning, but she was also thinking. The ways this battle was changing herself and her friends was massive. There were enemy demigods, fellow humans, fighting against them this time. Not a mechanical bull or a monster. She died a little inside when she threw that knife. She shouldn't have had to end that girl's life. Gray eyes turned to steel as Annabeth decided that she would never have to make that choice again. Nico D'Angelo was tired. He summoned a horde of dead warriors. Some were deceased US soldiers, others were Spartans. You name it, and he probably called them from the grave to fight. His sword was halfway deep into a Dracini's gut when a bullet grazed his shoulder. Nico turned and froze at the sight of several skeletons, larger than the ones he made, aiming their weapons at him. What are you doing? Nico asked. The skeletons hissed at him, taking aim with several weapons. One stepped forward, holding a large Bowie knife and AM-16. The skeleton chattered at him. You're going to kill me. Nico said, his eyes narrowing at the declaration. No. No, you're not. You're going back. The skeletons just took aim, ignoring him. Stop ignoring me. I am a son of Hades. Nico said. He spun his sword around and stabbed it down into the dirt. The earth rose up, crushing around the skeletons with guns. Only the skulls were visible and they were all packed together like sardines. Nico pulled his sword out of the ground and brought it up over his shoulders. And I said, go back. He swung his sword and the skeletons turned to gold dust, being absorbed into his sword. Nico stumbled, using his sword to steady himself. He huffed and puffed before smirking. Hope Dad rips you all a new one. Leo Valdez was having a blast. Down goes the ugly monster. Leo said with a cackle. He was using a crossbow with a design that he stole from that Hugh Jackman movie. The one with Dracula and the werewolf in it. He loaded a new clip and primed the crossbow. Get some, he said, firing rounds every second at the giants. He took 2 down so far, but it cost him 2 clips for each. He wanted to find a weak spot that would take less arrows to bring it down. One of the giants came around with his club, bringing it up over his head. Leo jumped and rolled out of the way, running into his friend Michael. Ready to do this? Michael asked, preparing a VY staple arrow. You know it, dude. Leo said with a grin. The giant roared at them and brought his club up. Michael fired the arrow at the giant's hand, successfully hitting the 30-foot monster in the ring finger. The club flew up as Leo fired at the giant's chin. The giant shrunk slightly to 20 feet and Leo nailed it under the jaw with the second half of his clip. It dissolved into golden dust and Leo cheered. Leo! Move! Michael said, pushing himself and his friend out of the way as the club came down. Leo landed with a grunt, his crossbow landing next to him with the empty clip popping out. He gave Michael a glare, but the words died on his tongue. Michael was pinned from the midsection down under the massive club, blood was being coughed out of his mouth. The son of Apollo looked up at his fellow black sheep and grinned, his teeth chipped and caked in blood. Idiot, should've, rolled. And Mike. Leo said. Leo, don't let them, take the camp. Michael said with his last breath. His head fell and his eyes shut for the last time. Leo stared at the corpse of his friend, who was there 1 minute and gone the next. It wasn't like TV or movies or books where there's this whole dramatic moment between 2 friends. Michael was there and then he wasn't. Like flipping a switch. I'll stop them. Leo said, his hands clenching into fists as tears filled his eyes. He got to his feet, his fingers tickled with flames. He was breathing heavily, eyes landing on the nearest monster. I'll stop all of them. Leo Valdez then became a blast of fire. Piper McLean was feeling so many things at once it was hard to describe exactly what she felt. She deflected the blade of the older demigod she faced against with her dagger from Zephyr, using Katropes to slice along the side of the sword using demigod. He crumpled to the ground on his knees, quickly fighting back to his feet and trying to stab Piper while one hand put pressure on the wound. Piper didn't know this boy, but she knew he was going to cause trouble later on. She prepared herself to deliver another blow when a cry of pain got her attention. Piper looked to the right where one of the sons of Dionysus, Pollux she thinks, was fighting another demigod. Piper's ADHD caught movement and she jumped back to avoid being slashed by her current foe. She turned to Pollux. Pollux. Switch, I'm Castor. The twin groaned, breaking away from his fight and sliding back, turning and bringing his sword down to slice Piper's former foe just as he rose to strike her. Piper in turn used her daggers to impale Castor's enemy in the sides as he went for the swinging decapitation. In another life, that would have marked the end of the son of Dionysus. As it were, the would-be victor was stabbed through the chest by Castor as Piper pulled her daggers back. The two panted, Castor favoring his arm with a wince, before Piper spoke. You should get that arm looked at. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Castor said. Want to give me a hand with that? Sure thing. Piper said, running with him back to the medical tent. Piper might not know what she's feeling at the moment, but she knew that she wouldn't let a fellow demigod die. Kakashi was distraught. He pulled his hand from another snake woman and sighed. This was way too easy. He deflected a demigod's blade that was swung at him from the left with his sword and stabbed the poor girl through the throat with a kunai, pulling out and murmuring a soft prayer for her soul as her body crumpled to the ground. It was like fighting enemy genin in the Third War all over again. Only this time, he was the older one. Damn that Luke kid. Why couldn't anything just be clean for his soul? Like zombie ninjas. He would rather be fighting undead hordes of old shinobi than kids with little to no, to him anyway, actual combat training. Kakashi sighed and tossed another kunai at a distant snake woman. Well, at least he could easily focus on something else that deserved his ire. Kushina was infuriated. These monsters thought they could take her stepchildren's home. Kill her idiot of a husband's kids? Kill her baby? And get away with it, rot in the underworld. Kushina said, chains of pure chakra exploding around her and impaling three giants. The chains coiled up and around, acting like a sadistic form of torture, before crushing the giants. An arrow was shot at her and Kushina drew her sword, slicing the arrow down the middle and causing it to take out two demigods running at her from the other direction. The archer, a young boy with pale blonde hair, looked at her with blue eyes and had her pausing for a moment. She saw sunny blonde and vibrant blue, whisker marks adorning his cheeks. Why are you doing this? Kushina asked him. The boy said nothing, quickly drawing another arrow. Kushina closed her eyes and formed a few seals with her free hand. Doton, Doriyuso, Earth Release, Earth Flow Spears. The archer gasped, his bow and arrow dropping to the ground as a large spike protruded from the ground, impaling him through the chest. Kushina released the technique and let the boy's body fall to the ground without another word. She shuddered and then walked away, trying to banish that image from her mind. Naruto was in pain. Sasur, Python was kicking him around the clearing. He kept letting Naruto heal and go for the first attack, but would avoid or block and beat Naruto back into the dirt. This monster was ancient and strong. Stronger because Naruto's arrows weren't as effective against it, the tips being bronze barely scratching him, and his bow was knocked out of the clearing in the midst of one hand-to-hand scuffle. As hideous as he looked, Python was definitely smart in having a human shell to protect him from celestial bronze. Come on! Python said with a roaring laugh. Where's all that bravado you had when you were fighting this boy? That power? I thought you were the heir of Helios. Get up. Let's get synced already. Helios said, trying to coach Naruto. Don't you think I haven't tried? Sasuke must have memorized how my chakra flow looks when we do that. Naruto thought back, pulling Eclipse out and holding it defensively. Then use the flash bang. Spam clones. Do something. Helios said. I'm working on it. Naruto said in return, getting an amused laugh from Python. Is that the voices in your head talking, or are you just psyching yourself up? The dragon asked with his crocodilian smirk still in place. I've learned much in my time observing the world, boy. The one thing I mastered is how to best the Soratonos at his specialty. Beat him down before he can get the first strike in, and you boy share the same style. Of course you're more of a predator. You play with your food. Now tell me. Naruto doubled over Python's knee as it embedded itself in his gut. Python then smacked his interlocked hands into Naruto's spine, making the blonde drop to the ground. Python rolled Naruto onto his back, bringing his foot up and slamming it down hard onto the dented chest plate. The blonde cried out and Python gave him a sadistic grin. How do you like being the prey? Get off! Naruto ground out. He raised Eclipse up to stab Python in the thigh, but the draconian human grabbed his hand, crushing it in his grip. Now! Python said, smirking. He pried the sword from Naruto's hand, increasing the pressure going into the blonde's chest as he did. He held the Stygian sword above him, examining it in the moonlight. Fascinating, much like his own project, only designed for defense rather than slaughter. I think you might have even given him the idea. What are you talking about? Naruto asked. He screamed as the sword was shoved into his other arm slowly. That's a surprise for another day, my boy. Python said with a smirk. He crushed Naruto's hand in his own. Besides, you have more important things to worry about right now. Do it now. I can barely focus on healing my broken bones. Naruto, you have to do something. Right, okay, oh gods it hurts already. Naruto thought. He grit his teeth and peered through one eye to glare at Python. Are you prepared to die? Python asked. This will be my only offer for a quick death. I have a question. Naruto asked. Python blinked and his smile seemed to widen. He nodded and Naruto hacked before he spoke again. Have you ever? Yes. Come on boy, speak. Tell me your final words. Python said, his smile more sadistic than even Hades on a good day. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? Naruto asked. Python blinked, his mouth opening to form the question, but Naruto didn't give him the chance. Solar flare. Arg, you little shit. Python said, stumbling back as he rubbed at his eyes. Little shit stain. I'll devour your entrails. Gah, damn it that hurts. Naruto looked at his hand, it wasn't broken, but the fingers were dislocated. He groaned. This was going to suck so much. He grit his teeth and formed a fist, his fingers snapping back into place and making him groan. He reached over, grabbing Eclipse and pulling it out of his arm. Naruto dropped his sword and as best he could with one arm, pulled his flak jacket off so he could get his chest plate off. Right now it was more of a hindrance than help. The golden armor fell to the ground with a clang and Naruto coughed, able to fully breathe once again. He got to his feet just in time to take a punch to the face, sending him back to the ground. You little fucker, I was going to kill you quickly just to get a point across, but now I guess I'll have to settle for putting you in your place first. Python said, snarling at him. His hand was pulled back once again before delivering another punch into Naruto's face, knocking a tooth out. There goes that molar. Naruto said with a groan. Python reached down and grabbed Naruto by the neck, lifting him up into the air as he squeezed. Naruto's hands gripped his arms, trying to pry him off his throat. The blonde spat blood onto the python's human face. Die! 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 Python said, the reptilian infuriated with being humiliated in such a manner. Been there. Naruto choked out. He clapped his hands on either side of the draconian human's head, his thumbs pressing into Python's eyes. Done that, Python cried out, his pain sounding like a combination of a dragon's roar and a human's yell. Naruto continued to press until there was a crack and Python let him go, stumbling back to claw at his eyes. They would heal, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt like a bitch. Naruto fell to his hands and knees once again, his impaled arms slowly healing thanks to Apollo's genes. He winced but got to his feet. It was now or never. Helios, let's light him up. Naruto said, his eyes flashing pure gold as the energy exploded from him. Golden fire encased him and Naruto felt rejuvenated, eyes narrowing on Python as he stumbled around, holding his face. He vanished in a flash of light, snatching Eclipse up, and delivered a spinning kick to Python's head, knocking the Dragon Man to the ground. Bastard! Python said, pushing himself to his hands and knees. Naruto stabbed the monster through the back, nailing him into the dirt. Arg! Fucking little prick. My girlfriend begs to differ. Naruto said. He jumped up and stomped onto the pommel, the sword going deeper. Golden orbs with blue suns glared down at Python. You won't die easily, will you? Not with this power. Python said, melting into earth and making Naruto's eyes widen. Tsuchi Bunshin. Naruto said to himself as he grabbed Eclipse and ducked under a swoop attack. Python landed with a skid and quickly turned to glare at Naruto. I'll admit, boy. I wasn't planning on you tapping into your inner titan. But then again, this body's previous owner never thought he'd be the one riding. How do the mortals say it now? Shotgun? Python asked. Naruto just glared at him and Python smirks. He's crying for my head, you know. Shut up. Naruto said with his dual voice. Oh, the language he has, his mother never raised him well. Python said with a chortle. Then again, I guess she wouldn't be able to, what with being killed by his brother on the words of the village elders. You're going to monologue, aren't you? Naruto asked under his breath. He glared. He preferred banter to monologues. You know what? Python asked as they started to circle each other. He chuckled again. This fellow is very interesting. Some man by the name of Danzo ordered Itachi to kill the whole clan, sparing only his brother. I already know this. Naruto said tiredly. Yes, his ambition to destroy Konoha, to kill you, is all based on the wrongdoing done to his dear older brother. Python said with a snort. How pathetic. Reminds me of your father. Always so eager to jump to his dear mommy's defense. Don't talk about Leto. Naruto said with a glare. Despite the fact that they hadn't met yet, his grandmother was off limits. Python's grin widened. I'll say this though. Python said with a grin, his wings spreading and his tail swishing eagerly. I can understand why he would go such a length. Even today, Leto is a very gorgeous being. Perhaps when this is all said and done, I will be rewarded with a prize. Naruto vanished in a flash of light, his sword brought up and down as he came out of the teleport. The Stygian iron was caught between Python's hands and began to slowly drain him. Python grinned widely, his resistance was proving to be a well-sought investment. Did I upset you? Python asked. I thought you wouldn't mind that sort of conversation. Shall we steer away to more personal matters? The subject of Kushina Uzumaki, perhaps? If anything, Naruto increased the pressure on his sword. A whole lot of interesting facts up here in this head. Python said. An image, a name, and an age, married. Look at you, the sole non-bastard of Soritonos, miracles do happen. Fuck. You. No, little sunspot. Python twisted the sword out of Naruto's hands and tossed it to the side, his hands clamping to Naruto's head and pressing his thumbs into Naruto's eyes. Naruto grabbed Python's wrists, trying to crush them in his grasp, to no avail. Python just chortled again. Fuck. You. Naruto yelled in pain as Python's thumbs started to drive his eyes back into his skull. He struggled, trying to pull Python's hands away from his face, before ultimately giving up on that tactic and going for a counter. Kneeing Python in the groin. Python's eyes crossed and he stumbled back with a groan. Naruto gained space between them, rubbing his eyes in pain and trying to get his sight back as fast as possible. He jumped back again, barely avoiding Python's tail slamming down and shattering the ground where he stood. Naruto's eyes opened, seeing a blurry figure spin and extend towards him. Golden arms shot up to block the appendage, only for it to be faint and a snap kick landing directly in his gut. Naruto was sent back, landing on his stomach with a grunt. He shook his head and quickly got back to his feet. A crackling sound had him sliding to the side, avoiding the Chidori sent in his direction. Naruto blinked the rest of the tears out of his eyes, glaring at Python as the monstrous draconian flexed his hands, static electricity dancing across them. Python laughed. I love this energy you call chakra. With it, I am unstoppable. I feel like I could topple Olympus with my bare hands. First you have to get through me. Naruto said, his palm gaining a familiar glowing orb. He rushed forward with the attack drawn back. Teoten, Rasengan. Python's smile widened again and he brought his scaled hand back as well. Loud chirping had filled the clearing as he ran forward with another Chidori at the ready. Both flung their respective attacks forward, colliding and causing a massive dome of energy to explode outward from it. The explosion covered the hill where Zeus' fist was covered, the monsters fleeing towards it from the bellow of a soul satyr eradicated in the explosion. It continued to spread towards the campers, being stopped by Kushina and Kakashi, Kushina throwing 5 tri-pronged kunai into the dirt and causing a purplish barrier to fly up. Jikuken Kekiai, Kushina said, her hands in a seal while she fed chakra through the technique. The barrier swallowed most of the blast and spat it out a good distance away over the ocean. Kakashi, his Sharinganai shifting into a new shape, covered the small gap with his own form of barrier. Kamui, Kakashi said, the blast being sucked into a small parallel dimension until it died down. Kakashi fell to his knees, panting while Kushina dropped her arms, feeling like noodles. He covered his eye quickly and panted in relief. Well, that was fun. You're telling me, Kakashi? Kushina said with a huff. Honestly, what kind of camp is this without a secure barrier jutsu? I just got here so you can't blame me. Sochi must have gotten lazy. I have no idea where he might have gotten that from. Kushina huffed. Must be his father's doing. Must be. Kakashi said with a nod. No way in hell was he going to take the fall for that. Sorry Apollo. Naruto pushed the fallen tree on him off, coughing up his mix of blood and ichor. He groaned as he got out of his rut. Golden orbs searched for the snake-like opponent, landing on the rut formed by Python. It was absent of a body. Oh, that doesn't bode well. Surprise! Python flew at the blonde from behind, wings spread wide and tackling him. Python took Naruto through several trees, over a farmland and into a small suburb, busting through a house of mortals eating dinner. Naruto was finally released, being thrown into the side of a SUV and making quite the dent in it. He fell from it with a groan, picking himself up. What the shit was that? Helios asked. He just plowed us into a friggin' mortal house. I noticed. Naruto thought back, groaning as he used the dented and alarm-blaring SUV to get back to his feet. I do not fear exposing our world, boy. Python said with a laugh. When this war ends, the world will know who its rightful rulers are. Kronos will be sure of that. The Draconian being turned to the house they shot through, the small family among with others on the porch watching in fear. Fire started to grow in his mouth, breaking through the gaps in his teeth. Python reared his head back and an enormous fireball shot from his mouth. Hiration. Naruto appeared in front of the family, his hands outstretched and absorbing the dragon's fire. He glared at the sadistic Python. They're innocent in this. No one is innocent. Python said with a laugh, his voice sounding not as raspy for a moment. The yellow in his eyes receded for a moment before they returned. His raspy voice was more pronoun when he spoke again. Besides, you have to hold back now, don't you, Mr. Hero? Naruto grit his teeth, his fists clenching. He's got a point. What do I do? Well, physical arrows won't do much, but perhaps some photokinetic arrows will. Helios said, and how would I do that? Sure, I've got photokinesis, but it's not all that great. Naruto said, I'll handle the material, you hit the mark. So basically, Helios chuckled. In the words of Megan Fox, I'll drive, you shoot, let's scrap him. Naruto thought with a grin. Behind Python, there was a glow before a familiar golden bow appeared laying on the ground. The golden demigod smirked. Thanks Dad. Naruto rushed at Python, the snake-like monster bracing himself to be attacked. Naruto smirked and teleported past Python, picking up his bow and drawing the string. A blindingly bright arrow burst to life, knocked and ready to fly. Naruto fired, hitting Python's wing and getting a roar for his troubles. Little shit. Python said with a snarl while some mothers covered their children's ears. He avoided another arrow, the red eye's pinwheels spinning as Naruto continued to take shots at him. Python gave another jeer as he charged forward. So much for your father's accuracy, boy. Who says I'm aiming for you? Naruto asked under his breath. Python ignored it, letting another roar out before tackling the golden demigod. Naruto went with it this time, his arm wrapping around Python's neck and other his hand, still holding his bow, grabbing the back of Python's ruined hakama. Naruto grinned. Hiration. They reappeared in the arena of Camp Half-Blood, Naruto using Python's momentum to drive the monster headfirst into the stone wall. Python fell to the ground, dazed, as did Naruto, whose back took quite a bit of damage at that decision. There was a shake in the ground and Naruto wondered what it could have been, but put those thoughts aside as Python wrapped his hands around Naruto's neck. "You insignificant little shitstain." Python hissed. "Do you know who I am? I am Python. The dragon of Gia. Protector of Pytho. The tormentor of Leto. The one that needs tic-tacs." Naruto grunted out, jamming a light arrow into Python's arm. The serpentine human roared, turning and tossing Naruto at a large cage, consequently destroying it. Naruto groaned as he lay on the ruins of the cage, rolling to the side and out of the way as a chirping arm thrust down to impale him through the chest. "Little maggot. Die already." Python hissed. "Not today," Naruto said, using his bow to sweep the monster's feet out from under him. He climbed to his feet and drew an arrow, shooting it at Python's head. He successfully hit the target, only for it to go up in smoke, replacing itself with a training dummy. Naruto swore and went on the defensive, rolling out of the way as a section of the arena seats were ripped out and thrown at him. The glowing son of Apollo came out of his roll, turning and taking aim with his bow at the section Python stood in, holding another row of seats above his head. Naruto released his light arrow, missing as Python jumped up, tossing the row of seats at the demigod. Naruto jumped back, landing in a crouch with his bow at the ready again, firing light arrow after light arrow in Python's direction. The draconian being flew down at him, avoiding the arrows until he was too close to bother with it. At that point, though, Python was blinded by rage. His Sharingan had turned to their next form, the atomic shape making Naruto scowl. "If Python can make Susanoo," Helios began. "I really hope he can't," Naruto thought as he rolled forward, dodging Python's crackling fists as they hit the dirt. He turned and fired arrows at Python's back, not taking true aim, but having a feel for where to shoot. "Please Dad, Auntie Arte, let me get a good shot in." The nearly set moonlight pierced through the clouds and Naruto's eyes narrowed as Python turned around. His wings were punctured to the point it was hard to determine where the light arrows began and the wing began. Naruto took aim and let his arrow fly, grinning as the arrow pierced Python's left knee. Python roared, dropping to his other knee and glaring at Naruto with so much effort that if possible, would have melted Naruto on the spot. "No. There is already one I must kill. I will not let there be another Sorictonos." He started to rise, only for Naruto to take the other knee out. Python roared and fell to his back to keep the pressure off the joints. Naruto approached cautiously, drawing another light arrow and pinning Python's right hand to the dirt. "You can't kill me," Python hissed. His scales peeled away, revealing Sasuke's face and hair like the scales were only armor. "Kill me and your friend dies. Gia will deem you a murderer forever. This is an enemy you don't want to make, boy. You threatened me," Naruto said, shooting another arrow into Python's right arm, pinning it to the dirt. He then took the tail out of the equation. "You threatened my dad." Python hissed at him, only to roar as his left hand and arm met the same fate as his right. "You threatened my Kachin and my grandmother." Naruto drew a final arrow and aimed. "As far as I'm concerned, I'm just protecting my family. I curse you, boy," Python swore. "Your soul will be mine to torture in Tartarus when Kronos rises. You will be my Bayerk." "Yeah. I'll try to keep that in mind," Naruto said, his light flickering away as he stared at the arrow piercing Sasuke/Python's neck, causing the man and the monster to choke on blood. Naruto backed away and let his bow fall to the ground before flipping his hands through seals. His head reared back and his chest expanded before he expelled a giant ball of fire, roasting the dying hybrid to ashes. Naruto watched the fire burn until the sun rose and nothing remained but a charred patch of dirt, smoke wafting off of it into the sky. The sun shone brightly down upon him as it rose. Naruto just closed his eyes and let his head dip as he said goodbye to his first friend. "May you finally be able to find peace with your family in death, Sasuke." Chapter 30. Naruto stood silent next to his mother, who had been allowed a few days of freedom while Persephone and Demeter discussed how to handle Pan's death. Since he helped keep animals from going crazy on farms, Nico and Bianca, the campers sorted in their respective cabins with the children of the big three seated at the front of the amphitheater. They all wore black t-shirts like the other campers, watching the bodies burned while wrapped in their shrouds. It was a bit selfish of him, but he wanted to be with his siblings. Michael was not the only child of Apollo to die in the Battle of the Labyrinth. They had lost 6 others, the most out of a cabin. Naruto's head dipped down as he silently listed the names of his little brothers and sisters. Samantha Anderson. Age 13. Second year at camp. She wanted to be a singer. A giant stepped on her. Ross Cunningham. Age 15. Third year. He was a cartoonist and wanted to work at Marvel Studios. Killed by a turned demigod. Clifton Owens. Age 10. First year. Burned in the trees with Jenna May. He wanted to be a race car driver. Jenna May Peters. Age 10. First year. Burned in the trees next to Clifton. She wanted to be a dancer. Colin Rogers. Age 14. Third year. Burned trying to save Clifton and Jenna May. He wanted to play in the NBA. John and Owen Vale. Age 15. Fifth year. John wanted to go into music study and Owen wanted to be on Broadway. 8 lights were snuffed out in that battle, and more would follow with the coming war. Naruto watched the pyre get lit and his fist clenched tightly as it passed over the first golden shroud. There were others that were lost, a poor son of Demeter, a daughter of Hephaestus. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't actually a lot of dead, but to these kids it was enough. Naruto had lived through an invasion like this once before, though then he was lucky enough not to have to kill an opponent, though the trade-off of nearly dying from a pierced lung wasn't as great either, but had lost fellow comrades and his pseudo-grandfather. Losing the old leader was like losing half his childhood. Then losing Jiraiya to pain. Naruto shook his head. That one still stung a bit, especially now. As the ceremony ended, Naruto thought back to his prophecy's last 2 lines. After the Guardian's past returns twice more. 2 brothers shall fall during the Labyrinth's war. More than one brother fell. Naruto thought bitterly. Well, there's actually a reason for that line, Naruto. Helios said. Naruto said nothing, and the Titan continued on. Brothers in this case refers not to blood, but to bonds. Naruto said under his breath, getting a look from Bianca that he waved off. But Michael was my blood brother, and while we had a strong bond, it wasn't like the bond Sasuke and I had. Kid, the bond you and Sasuke had was one akin to Orion and Artemis. Sexual tension included. Fuck you. Just saying. Helios said, chuckling. The point is the bond we're talking about here is one of outcasts. Michael was the brother to Leo. Naruto said, it all falling into place in his head. He furrowed his brow. There wasn't any sexual tension there. Well, not from Leo. Go figure. Never saw that coming. TCH, rookie. The ceremony ended and Chiron gave a nod to the impatient satyr standing off to the side. Percy, Talia, Grover and Annabeth followed him into the cloven. With his mother's approving nod, Naruto swiftly joined up with them, giving Lee a small apologetic glance as he walked past while Apollo's cabin counselor comforted Katie Gardner. Naruto let his hand slip around Talia's, the daughter of Zeus, intertwining her fingers with his in support as they walked. The trial was a farce as far as Naruto was concerned. The satyrs were too stubborn, unable to accept that gods could die. Aside from the fact that he, Phoebe and Reyna were proof of otherwise, Grover had apparently used panic, Pan's mightiest weapon in early God Wars. That, coupled with Nico releasing Deadless Soul from its confines, would explain the shaking of the earth he had felt when he fought Python/Sasuke. This is bullshit. Naruto said, getting a nod from Talia as they listened to the angry elder satyr call for Grover's banishment. Pan is dead. Grover finally said in his defense. He looked confident and stood tall, Percy and Annabeth at one side while Juniper was at the other. The wheelchair-bound Chiron gave a proud smile to the satyr and Naruto stood from where he leaned against a tree, Talia doing the same. They came to stand behind their satyr as he continued. It falls to us to save the wild. If we don't act silence, Grover Underwood. You shame your ancestors for speaking such lies. Excuse me? Did I hear something about lies? A new voice asked. Eyes went to the clearing and dressed in a relaxed business suit was one of Naruto's 2 favorite uncles, Hermes. He wasn't playful at the moment though, he was distraught and angry, and it could be seen in his cold blue eyes. Lord Hermes. The elder satyr, Silenus, said, blinking in surprise before he recollected himself. Why yes, well we were just discussing the banishment of Grover Underwood, who claims Pan to be dead. Which is ridiculous. Pan is dead. Hermes said, the Grove going silent. He looked to Grover and gave him a nod. You do me great honor, Grover. Finding Pan before he. Hermes definitely looked like he was living a poor life at the moment, and Naruto understood. Many parents would tell him how horrible it was to have to outlive your child. Apparently it was no different with the gods. Naruto wondered exactly how horrible that was, seeing each and every mortal child you ever had die while you continued on. He quietly vowed never to put himself in that situation. Anyway. Hermes' voice broke Naruto from his inner questions. Pan is dead. I feel it in my very ichor-filled veins. The gods he worked closely with have felt it, his passing. You shame us by dare suggesting that the one who found him, is delivering his message, is lying. Be but Lord Hermes. It is a lee dash. If you finish that accusation Silenus, I will ensure that Hades has his first satyr soul to torture. Hermes said with a glare. The Cloven elders collectively shuddered at the look. Now, as to whether this begets banishment, I vote it doesn't. I vote no on the banishment as well. Chiron said, the council will vote. All in favor? Silenus asked. His two goons flanking him, both equally aged satyrs, shared concerned looks before they raised their hands along with Silenus. 3-2. A god's vote is worth 2. Hermes said coolly. Silenus opened his mouth to argue and Hermes' eyes narrowed. I warn you, I have just come as close as I ever will to terms with my son's passing, and if you try to trifle with me, you will regret it. Silenus' mouth shut again with a click. The motion is dissolved. Hermes said, daring the council to challenge him again. They were no fools, though, as they collectively left, but not before Silenus sent Grover a look of anger. Hermes watched them leave before he approached the satyr on trial. You have a big job ahead of you, Grover Underwood, but your message will be passed along without issue. There will be bumps, but it will get through. Thank you, Lord Hermes. Grover said, bowing. Hermes smiled, a lot like Pan's, and rubbed Grover's curly hair. Don't mention it. Hermes turned to leave, his eyes catching Naruto's before he did and the air of Helios nodded slightly. The messenger god left the grove and, after giving Grover a pat on the shoulder after Juniper gave him a kiss, Naruto followed after him. Surprisingly, Naruto caught up to his uncle rather quickly. Unsurprisingly, Hermes had changed from a formal suit into a UPS uniform, talking on his phone in Attic Greek. Naruto heard the words for immediate, important, and do not fail. Hermes shut his phone with a click, twisting it in his hands as it became his caduceus. The god turned and gave Naruto a smile, and while it looked like Pan's, there was a weight of sadness behind it. Hey kiddo, how's it going? Hermes asked. Not good. Naruto said, getting a nod from the god. I hear you. Packages in Florida are backing up again. It's horrible mess down there because of a bunch of floods. Hermes said, giving a fake smile that Naruto had seen many times in the mirror. Uncle Hermes. Naruto faltered for a moment. He didn't want to blame Luke for all of this, especially not to the god's face, but he had to tell Hermes what was wrong with the demigod. You might want to sit down. Hermes' failed smile fell. Something wrong, you need to sit down, first. Naruto said. Hermes nodded and he brought a toppled tree over to them with a snap of his fingers. The dryad that came out gave him a dirty look before realizing just who she was looking at and bailing. Hermes sat and gestured for Naruto to join him. What's on your chest, kiddo? Hermes asked. Naruto's tongue felt like lead. He wondered if this was a curse, always being honest and telling the truth. Seeing the broken look in Hermes' eyes was horrible, like one more bad thing would make the Olympian snap. No, he has to know. He deserves to know. Naruto told himself as he sat on the log. Uncle Hermes, Luke is, he. Naruto failed to find words at first. Mentioning Luke's name had the god stiffening where he sat. The following news would probably shatter Hermes' spirit. Taking a deep breath, Naruto told him. About the thing with Kronos. About his actions in the labyrinth. About what happened with Atlas. Hermes just stayed quiet, still stiff and his knuckles turning white around the caduceus as Naruto continued. Finally, when Naruto finished, he studied the god just as Hermes stared back at him. There was a storm behind Hermes' eyes. Denial. Anger. Depression. All sorts of human emotions. It made Naruto wonder just how wonderful immortality was. Is that all? Hermes asked, his voice even and betraying nothing. I'm sorry, Uncle Herm. Naruto said, looking at the ground. This was the hardest part for him to admit. But we might have to. Don't say it. Hermes wasn't pleading, he was ordering Naruto not to finish that thought. He took a deep breath before putting his hand on Naruto's shoulder. You're so much like Helios, it's scary, do you know that? Trust me. I have an idea. Naruto said, getting a sad smile from his uncle. Brutally honest, bad news when we don't want it, not even Apollo would make those choices. Hermes said, his hand pulling back to rest on his lap. I wouldn't like this information to spread, Naruto. He wasn't here at the battle, so I can have some hope, right? You said the mortal girl's hairbrush stirred something in him. Yes. Naruto said, then there is a way to get him back. Hermes said, not leaving room for discussion. Thank you for bringing this to me before any of the others. He stood and began walking away. Uncle Herm. Naruto said, getting to his feet. Hermes turned and Naruto gave him an apologetic smile. If you can't find a way to save him, I will. Hermes said, giving his nephew a glare for suggesting otherwise. I've lost one too many sons this millennium, Naruto. Naruto said nothing, his warning was given and Hermes was aware of what he would do if necessary. They said nothing more, Naruto watching as Hermes vanished, space bending around him and fading away until nothing but the breeze filled the air. Naruto looked up at the sky, where the sun continued to shine down on him between the clouds. Naruto stayed with Cabin 7 that night, leaving clones with Bianca and Nico, the normally glowing cabin looking dim when people walked past. He took a bunk that was once John's, and at night they had a sing-along, choosing the phrase, how to save a life, to sing before bed. It hit Naruto hard, considering he was taken out of the battle early. How many lives could have been saved had he been able to fight? Does anyone blame him for not being there? Why was it always the youngest, that had the brightest futures ahead of them, had to die? It was questions like these that kept him awake until he finally fell asleep. Naruto woke up in tears that night, the faces of his siblings who had died were smiling in his dreams. He sat up and put his hands to his face, feeling the tears fall silently down his cheeks. Sochi. A gentle voice said, pulling him into a hug. It's okay to cry. So he did. His arms wrapped around his mother's side and his face buried itself in her shoulder, dry heaving but quiet sobs leaving him while Kushina hummed and pet his hair. Naruto clung to her, feeling so very small at the moment and his heart felt like it was in a vice. They're gone, and it's all my fault. Naruto choked out. No, Sochi, no it's not. Kushina said softly. You did your best. I could have saved them. Naruto said, maybe. Kushina said, maybe. You do so much good, Naruto, but even you can't be everywhere at once. Only you could have stopped Sasuke. She pushed him back gently, giving him a warm smile. You're so hard on yourself. You do so much for others and put so much weight on your shoulders. She kissed his forehead and pulled him into another hug. And I'm so proud of you. Naruto just broke down in tears. A few days later, camp was getting back to normal and the two newcomers were settling into their jobs of choice. Kakashi as sword master, always reading a book, not Ika Ika, as he taught the kids. Eri's cabin hated him. That wasn't surprising, as the sarcastic laid-back shinobi just ground on everybody's nerves when he was teaching them. Outside of the lessons he was probably the Hermes cabin's favorite, and the Stoll twins picked up masks of their own to emulate him. Kushina took up residence as sort of a guidance counselor and teacher for other forms of combat. Her favorite duty, however, was to dote on her stepchildren. Did she like the fact that other women have been with her husband? No, not particularly. But that didn't mean she hated her stepchildren. It was no fault of theirs that Apollo stupidly sealed his married memories away. After all, she adored all of them, becoming a second mother to them and doing her best to learn all about their lives so far. It was when Kushina was talking to Lee about his girlfriend that she stumbled across some very interesting information. Information that her son had neglected to tell her about. Information that was life-changing. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto winced, wondering what he had done now to incur his mother's wrath. All he had been doing all day was lazing about with Taliah and Ranger on the couch, the big cat resting his head on Naruto's lap while Taliah rested her head on his shoulders, and they watched the Fellowship of the Ring. Hopefully she wouldn't find him in cabin 1. The last thing he needed was to be chewed out in his girlfriend's cabin. The back door of the room was banged on and he paused the movie. Taliah gave him an amused look while he pouted at her. She'd find out sooner or later. Taliah said, "Yeah, but I thought that bribe with cabin 10 was good enough to keep their mouths shut for another month." Naruto said. The door was banged on again and he groaned. "Hi, Kachin, be there in a second. Mama's boy." "Oh, shut up, Lia-chan," Naruto said to his snickering girlfriend. He grumbled as he unlocked the door and opened it, seeing his mother standing before him with an eerie gleam in her eye. Hey, Kachin, where is she?" Kushina asked. "In the cabin." "Well, bring her out here," Kushina said. Naruto blinked and she shook her head. "Technically I work for Hades." "Oh, right," Naruto said, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. He might have a pass, though Naruto felt that pass might get revoked sometime soon, but there was nothing that said Kushina did. He turned back into the room and walked to the couch, snatching the remote from Taliah and pausing the movie again. "Kachin wants to talk to you. What?" Taliah asked, looking at Naruto like a deer in the headlights. "Yep. So come on, Lia-chan," Naruto said, dropping the remote on the couch before tapping his lazy saber-tooth. "Get up and greet Kachin, Range." Ranger yawned and slumped down to the floor, stretching out his limbs as he walked behind Taliah to the front door. He bounded past Taliah once he got outside, sniffing the bodyguard of Persephone before he rubbed against her legs, claiming her as one of his humans so his siblings didn't get any funny ideas. Kushina just laughed and pet the giant saber-tooth on the head, getting deep purrs from the giant cat. Taliah watched this, taking in Kushina's appearance once again and feeling just a bit jealous. She was a beautiful woman, whose skill with a blade and ninjutsu surpassed her in ways Taliah couldn't begin to describe. She was the epitome of mother bear, and frankly, wouldn't be surprised if that was the animal she chose to represent her. "Kachin, Taliah Grace," Naruto said from behind her, pushing the daughter of Zeus forward. "Taliah, this is my Kachin. Hello." Taliah gave a small wave, wondering why she felt like she was just thrown to the wolves. Kushina stood upright and began walking around Taliah. Her hand went to her chin, the elbow supported by the other hand, and amethyst eyes were washing over the daughter of Zeus. The red-headed woman hummed, making Taliah squirm. Taliah yelped. She did not squeak, despite whatever her idiot of a boyfriend ever says, as hands she was not familiar with began patting her hips from behind. I suppose they'll do," Taliah heard her mutter. "Do what, exactly?" Kushina turned to give Naruto a thumbs up. "Well done, Sochi. Now, when should we expect?" "Huh?" Naruto asked with a blink. "Expect what?" Taliah asked, her arms crossed over her chest after the weird touch she got from the red-headed woman. "Grandbabies, of course," Kushina said, her eyes rolling. Her statement had the couple bursting into sputtering messes. "I'm not pregnant. And I'm not ready for that," Taliah said as she turned red. "I'm only 19. Yeah, and I'm not ready to be a father," Naruto said, nodding in agreement. "Nonsense," Kushina said, waving their protests off. "Kachin, we're in the middle of a war. So? Your father and I made you in the middle of the third war. I don't want to hear that," Naruto said, his hands clapping over his ears. He wanted to shoot himself. He wasn't his aunt, he didn't want to know how, when or where he was conceived. Taliah was no better, making strangling noises where she stood. To make it a little worse, Kakashi was walking over to them with 2 cigars in hand. He blinked. "Did I pick a bad time? Come back later," Kushina said, waving him away. "We're making baby plans." Kakashi blinked. He shrugged and turned around. "I'll just save these for the stag party." "Good luck, Naruto." "Gods, damn it, Kakashi," Naruto said, his hands going to his face and dragging down before he continued. "Kachin, we're not having babies." But Sochi," Kushina said, whining. She pouted at him. "Grandbabies." They're so cute and cuddly and fun to spoil. You've got stepchildren, Naruto said dryly, making Kushina's pout increase. True, but with me back, Apollo's pretty much cut off from having any more. Kushina said, smirking at him. And when those run out, I'll be getting grandbabies. Yeah, sure Kachin. Naruto said with a nod, getting a look from Taliah. He leaned over to her and whispered. Just roll with it. Yay! Kushina said, her hands flying above her head with a wide smile. She gave Naruto a kiss on the cheek and then pulled Taliah into a hug. Have fun you too. We just dodged the biggest bullet to ever walk this earth. Naruto said to Taliah, who nodded numbly. We will never speak of this again. Yep. Days had passed and Kushina was happily distracted with her stepchildren, leaving Naruto and Taliah free to do their own thing. Unfortunately, today was not one of those days, as Taliah had to teach the spear using class since Clarice took a few days off to be with Chris in New York. This left Naruto alone, not in the mood to personally teach hand-to-hand and leaving the job to a clone. Bored, I'm so bored. Naruto said as he sat upside down on the couch in Cabin 13's living space. He couldn't bug Annabeth because she was teaching Greek. Percy was actually studying on his own, so he couldn't implement tests. Leo was holed up with Beckendorf working on some top-secret project, so no good pranks could be done. Piper was in class with Kakashi, so he couldn't train her in the ninja arts or get a good spar. And his mother had gone to check on Persephone, so there weren't any ramen-eating contests. Ranger yawned on the floor and Naruto soon followed his example. There was just nothing to do. And that was the worst feeling imaginable to Konoha's #1 hyperactive knucklehead ninja. I guess I could try and see behind Kakashi's mask again. Naruto said, though while once enticing, he just didn't care anymore. It was hard to imagine the man without his mask. Naruto groaned and clawed at his head. I wish something would happen to make the boredom go away. You should be careful with wishes like that, young hero. Naruto pushed himself off the couch, standing upright from his impromptu flip and looking in the direction of the newcomer. The speaker was a petite woman with short blonde hair and golden eyes. She was wearing a navy blue Nike tracksuit and shoes of the same brand. White wings spread slightly from her back and a golden wreath of laurel leaves in her left hand. The woman gave a winning smile to him. Hello, young hero. A pleasure to meet you. Hi. Naruto said, not recognizing the goddess. Taking a guess from the product placement, he asked. Are you, Nike? First place goes to you. Nike said with a laugh. Naruto just nodded, wondering why the goddess of victory was visiting him. Luckily, Nike seemed to sense that and gave him another winning smile. Someone high up wants to meet with you, young hero. So I was sent to pick you up. Well, more like I volunteered. Volunteered? Naruto asked, a bit on edge. Nike was a herald of Zeus, one of his most trusted companions. He could guess who had sent her and was pretty much praying that it wasn't to kill him. Why would you do that? Nike just smiled. You're my granddaughter's godfather. I figured I should get to know you. Come again? Naruto asked. He had one goddaughter and she was. Well, that certainly explained Iam's positive outlook on life. Yes, dear little Reiko. She's a cutie, has her grandma's eyes. It's been driving Iam's poor husband up the wall wondering where they came from. Nike said with a grin. Yeah, Irika-sensei would do that. Naruto said, chuckling. There was something he could do, sneak a visit to his goddaughter. After this trip of course. He walked over to the charioteer and nervously smiled. So, to the gallows then? Nike bopped him on the head with her laurel. Don't be so negative. We're just going to Olympus for a meeting. Now come on. The winged woman grabbed Naruto by the wrist and pulled him along after her out the door. A golden chariot, not as bright as his own, adorned with lightning bolts along the sides and the front awaited them. Two storm-like horses stood at the end, their manes crackling with lightning that filled their dark storm cloud-like bodies. Nike just whistled and they whinnied, taking off after Naruto and Nike climbed onto the chariot. They climbed high into the sky, Naruto clinging to the chariot with chakra as Nike directed her horses like a master. Climb, triumph. Onward, strive. Nike cheered her steeds on, the spirits whinnying at her urging and speeding up. She gave a grin to Naruto. Newest batch born, their great-great-great-grandfathers pulled the original chariot. Cool. Yes, they certainly are. You might have lucked out with Zephyr, but there's nothing more rewarding than taming the beast and befriending it. Nike said. I know that feeling. Naruto said, thinking to his nine-tailed friend. So who asked for me? You can tell me that much, right? Where's the fun in that, young hero? Figures. Nike laughed. It is not Lord Zeus, if that is what concerns you. Oh, well, that's a relief. Naruto said, his shoulders relaxing. I cannot promise he won't pull you aside, though. Oh. Joy. Your question will be answered shortly, young hero. Here we are. Nike said, her chariot landing on the metaphysical mountain. Naruto could never get over the awe that he felt whenever he was on Olympus. The blonde stepped off the chariot and followed Nike, the winged woman beckoning him to follow as she rushed ahead. They finally came to a stop outside a temple whose doors were engraved with the image of a peacock, and Naruto felt his blood leave his face. Have a nice conversation, young hero. Nike said before giving him a clap on the shoulder. And check in on my daughter every now and then. Why yes, ma'am. Naruto said, feeling the hidden threat in her words wash over him. The goddess beamed at him and bounded away, yelling a playful challenge to a group of nymphs. Naruto looked back up at the doors and steeled himself as best he could, walking up and raising his hand to knock on the doors. The door cracked open before he could, and Naruto heard Helios humming the funeral march. Ignoring it, Naruto entered, keeping his head high as he walked into the temple. He stopped and knelt when he came to Hera's throne, the goddess sitting in it regally while a young girl poured her a glass of nectar. He guessed the cupbearer was Hebe, wife to the jerk himself, Heracles. Hera gave her daughter a smile of thanks before setting the cup on a small table that had a scroll of sorts next to it. Naruto Uzumaki. Hera said, making Naruto straighten up. Son of Apollo. Heir of Helios. Neosoric Tonos. Well, of course that name stuck. Naruto thought with a small smirk. Snakes had to die. You answered my summons without hesitation. Impressive. Hera said. Naruto said nothing, the goddess arching a delicate brow before she waved her hand. You may speak, Naruto. Why have you summoned me, Lady Hera? Naruto asked, rising to his feet. Prior to the Battle of the Labyrinth, I assisted Athena's daughter and she asked me why I chose to help her instead of you, since there was the rare event of 2 quests going instead of just 1. Hera said. I told her how I have watched you since you learned of your father's true self and how you are a true demigod thanks to your mother miraculously tying down Apollo. Your bravery and the care you show for your family makes you a good man in my eyes. Naruto was standing straight at the praise, though he ignored being called a true demigod. Aside from your choice who you have a relationship with, of course. Hera said, watching him intently for an outburst of some sort. Naruto managed to keep his anger down, though his gaze had hardened slightly. Content that he wasn't going to speak out, Hera continued. That all said, I would like to offer you the position of being my champion. The offer is formal, right? I have to accept, don't I? Naruto asked. Hera smiled slightly. Clever boy. I try. Naruto said. He frowned. Why me? Don't you already have a champion in Jason? Juno does, yes. Hera said, making Naruto nod. But I need a true champion, just as Pan did. You are a demigod I never thought would have been born, yet here you stand. So, I ask again, will you be my champion? It would be an honor. Naruto said, bowing. Hera smiled and rose from her seat, walking to him in a stride before placing her hand on his head. I name you, Naruto Uzumaki, as my champion. Your body will never fall victim to mortal frailty and your loyalty shall never falter. There was a light glow and Naruto felt a warmth cascade over him. Hera stepped back and nodded at him, her smile still in place. Go, Naruto Uzumaki, and prove yourself worthy of my blessing. Thank you, Lady Hera. Naruto said, bowing again before he turned and left the Queen of Olympus to herself. I think Hera likes boys with blonde hair and blue eyes. Helios said after a moment. Naruto choked and nearly tumbled over a nymph that had crouched down to pick a flower of some sort from the cracks in the golden stone that lined the pathway. Giving a quick apology to the nymph and sending a silent glare to Helios, Naruto resumed his search for Nike. He needed a ride back to camp and Zephyr was also strangely missing. He kept wandering Olympus halls, bowing his head to the minor gods he passed to show his respect. Not many would bow for a forgotten mother. A voice said as he bowed again. A hand lightly tilted his head up and Naruto's eyes widened. A goddess with milky skin and dark hair that cascaded down her back like a river. Two silvery eyes like stars in the night sky met his sunny blue sky-like eyes, and a connection was formed. Grandma?" Naruto asked hesitantly. Leto smiled at him, a smile that reminded him of his mother's and his aunt's, the smile that someone with only maternal instincts could have, and she nodded. "Yes, I suppose I am." "Hello Naruto." Hi Grandma Leto." Naruto said, "Thank you for killing Python again." Leto said. She smiled brightly at him. "Since the foolish serpent bound himself to a mortal, he'll be tortured for quite a while. It was necessary." Naruto said solemnly, his eyes turning down. Leto tilted his head up again. "Now, enough of that. Your friend chose his path and you chose your own. And I, for one, am very grateful for it," Leto said, giving him a kiss on the forehead. Naruto flushed a bit, making her smile. "Such a modest boy. Why can't your father act that way?" "Because he's awesome," Naruto said, using finger quotes on the word awesome. His dad was great and cool, but awesome was not the word Naruto would use to describe him. "Well, at least not all the time," Leto giggled. "Yes, and hopefully that'll change with his marriage. Along with responsibility. Honestly, back when he first started out he was always on time, even in the winter. Now it's a different time every day, minutes off each day. If only he were more responsible like his sister. Well, we did send him an alarm clock," Naruto said, thinking of the gift he and his siblings picked out from Amazon. "Unfortunately, with him already married and Artemis swearing men off altogether, which I have no idea where she got it from. I mean, really, how are we supposed to bond if she can't come to me about her boy problems?" Leto asked with a pout, Naruto snickering. Leto sighed. "Anyway, with both of them unlikely to come to me for this, I figure I should give it to a worthy legacy. Here, Naruto." She placed a small item in his hand. Naruto looked it over, a simple yet elegant intertwining band of gold and silver. The blonde put it in his pouch, determined to find a safe place for it when he got back to the camp. "A gift from my mother after I decided that my twins were enough," Leto said with a smile. "She wanted to give it to me after I got married, but I'm enjoying being a grandmother. My grandchildren's lives are far more entertaining. And to be frank, I can't wait to have some one-on-one time with your mother. The stories I'll hear." "You mean about Dad's time in Konoha, right?" Naruto asked. "Oh yes, sure," Leto said, waving him off. It didn't exactly reassure Naruto, but he wasn't about to argue with her. The mother of the Letoid smiled at her grandson, giving him another hug. "You must get going before Zeus decides to come investigate the strange feeling on Olympus. The rants he has about you sometimes. It puts the rest of Olympus in stitches, but I suppose it would be rather frightening for you." "Probably," Naruto agreed. He hugged Leto back. "Bye Grandma. I'll tell the others you say hi. No offense, but we were all worried you faded. As long as Apollo and Artemis stories remain, so shall I," Leto said to comfort him as she squeezed him back. "Now get going, Naruto. Give your siblings my love." "You got it, Grandma," Naruto said once he pulled away. Leto pointed him in the direction of where Nike was last seen and with a final goodbye, he was running off, beaming at the encounter. Leto watched him run, a smile spreading across her face. He certainly was a little storm, not unlike his grandfather, but had a more prominent sunny personality like her son and his predecessor. The sound of a scoff had Leto turning, giving a small smirk to the owner of the noise. "You shouldn't have stopped him. Zeus would have caught him if you delayed him any longer," Hera said, giving the Titaness a mild glare. Leto's smirk widened by a margin. "You're just mad that I gave him a ring before you could have." "I am not," Hera said, her nose scrunching from her frown's growth. "I suppose you are right, Lady Hera," Leto said, giving a small bow before walking on. "Do remember that you cannot monopolize him just because he is your champion. Besides, a gift from his grandmother was far overdue." Hera scowled, her arms crossing over her chest as she watched the Titaness walk away. Naruto waved goodbye to Nike, walking back into his cabin and giving Will a sly look as he walked out of Bianca's room. It was just a checkout. I mean, we just finished a makeup. Shut up, Naruto. Will said, storming out. Must have been steamy if he's that red. Naruto said as he walked past Bianca's room. There was a squeak before the door slammed shut. Naruto chuckled. Good thing Nico moved out. Hard to believe he's my second in command now. Naruto went to his room, digging through his back pouch and pulling the golden and silver ring out. He flopped back on his bed, Ranger jumping up from the floor to join him. The blonde demigod idly scratched the saber tooth behind the ear as he looked at the ring. I wonder why Grandma Leto gave the ring to me and not any of my older siblings that got married. Chapter 31. And Kurama came to smother the baby with kisses. Naruto said to the baby in his arm, the stuffed nine-tailed fox in his hand coming forward and being gently brushed around Reiko's face. He'd decided to visit his goddaughter, considering he knew her grandmother now on a first-name basis. He smiled as Reiko squealed happily. She really was a happy baby and definitely had her grandmother's eyes. He glanced at the kitchen where Ayam was showing Talia the secret to Ichiraka ramen, something he would literally kill to know. He had brought Talia to show her around Konoha, to be more open about his first life as she asked. She wasn't thrilled, but conceded that it was a big part of his life, practically the purpose he lived for prior to learning his father's identity, and agreed to join him. With a ride from Zephyr, which Naruto admitted hadn't needed to be done, but with Kronos on the loose he couldn't risk using the Hiraishin, they were in Konoha within the hour. Fortunately for them, Naruto had thought ahead and sent an IM to Irika, shocking the poor man with the message. After a reassurance that he would explain the method of IM, Naruto had scored a place to stay without constant ANBU supervision in the Yumino household while two clones stayed at Naruto's apartment, one disguised as Talia. Unfortunately for him, IM had decided that Talia needed to be prepared to feed an Uzumaki, as her father had told her of Naruto's mother after Naruto's last visit and deemed the love for their ramen hereditary. This also meant he was to be tortured with the smell of ramen while he entertained his adorable goddaughter. If only he could enjoy some while playing with Reiko, life would almost be perfect. Aside from the whole Titan God War thing going on, he wondered what they were talking about. Stupid noodles. Talia said with a scowl as she ditched the latest batch of her attempts with a simple chuck out the window. Ayam giggled and got a glare from Talia. The daughter of Zeus wouldn't admit it, but this ramen thing, for being a simple dish, was friggin' hard to get right. Oh, stop. You'll get it. Ayam said with a smile. Damn right I'll get it, Talia said. She grabbed another bag of flour and an egg. Stupid whiskers, why can't he like something normal like pancakes or burgers? What's normal to you is abnormal to me. Ayam said. She watched Talia break the egg and grabbed the bowl before she could stir it. You're breaking the egg wrong. How? Talia asked. It's how you break it. The motion is good, but the force, you're far too angry. Ayam said, that's from my dad. Talia said. Not my fault. Yes it is. Ayam said. When you cook, you focus on what you're doing too much. I didn't think it was possible, but you have too much determination. You're not putting any heart in it. That sounds like something Cabin 10 would say. Naruto said from the doorway. Any ramen yihei. Out, out, out. Ayam said, pushing the taller teen out of the kitchen. Play with your goddaughter. And how many times must I tell you, no jutsu in my house? That was the first time. The clone said. He exploded in a cloud of smoke after she bopped him on the head. Ayam gave the real, and rather sheepish-looking, Naruto a stern look before retreating back into the kitchen. I don't understand. How do you put heart into breaking an egg? Talia asked. Well, I used to think of how happy the customers were when they ate my father's ramen. Ayam said, looking off at nothing specifically. A smile crossed her face. And then I met Irika-kun. My ramen got even better, and my father told me his secret. He would think of my mother's smile. I don't get it. Talia said. Ayam rolled her eyes. I want you to think of the brightest smile you've ever seen on Naruto's face. Then, once it's in your mind, break the egg. Whatever you say, egg whisperer, Talia said. She looked back at the bowl of flour set in front of her. She grabbed the egg and closed her eyes, thinking back. There was the night in Naruto's apartment. Talia turned a bit red. That wasn't a bright smile, well it was, but not the right smile. She continued to think back and her mind landed on the last New Year's celebration. Before they retreated to Cabin 1, Naruto had wished her a happy new year, not with his largest smile, but certainly his brightest. This thought in mind, Taliah cracked the egg and dropped it into the flour. She stirred the mix until it solidified. She dumped the dough onto the table and began kneading it. Minutes passed by and Taliah continued until she had thick, curly strands of noodles. Ayam pulled a bowl of miso soup, which she had shown to Taliah how to make before, over and had Taliah put the noodles within it. They stirred and added extra meats. A few more minutes later and Naruto, with Reiko in his arms, was seated at a table. A bowl of ramen was set before him. Ayam took her daughter from him and Naruto looked at Taliah. The punk daughter of Zeus was watching from the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest while electric blue eyes watched on intently. Naruto let a smile break across his face. "Shut up, Whiskers," Taliah said, her cheeks turning pink. "I didn't say anything, Lia-chan," Naruto said. "Just eat the damn noodles," she said, her eyes turning away while her cheeks darkened a bit. Naruto chuckled and picked up his chopsticks, breaking them apart as soon as he had. He took a strand of noodles and spun them around before putting them in his mouth. A second later and he moaned in mid-bite, "Eat seriously, Naruto." Taliah became a bit miffed at his exaggerations. "It's that good, though," Naruto said, smiling at her before he dove back into the bowl of ramen. When he was finished, Naruto leaned back, his chopstick set in the bowl and his arm draped behind the back of the chair. He patted his stomach and smiled. "That was the best ramen I've ever eaten. No offense, I am Nichan. None taken," Ayam said with a tittering giggle as she walked off to feed Reiko. "Damn right, it's the best you've ever had," Taliah said with a huff. Naruto stood up and walked over to her, putting his hands on her hips and leaning his forehead against hers, his grin still on his face. The proximity had her cheeks heating up. "What? My Kachin was right. You are a keeper," Naruto said, giving her a peck on the lips. "Thanks for the ramen, Lia-chan." Taliah averted her eyes, the ghost of a smile on her face. "Whatever, Whiskers. When you act all shy like that it just makes me want to kiss you more," Naruto said, tilting her head up and kissing her again. This time it wasn't just a peck and Taliah didn't shy away. Ahem. The two broke their kiss and looked at the mother breastfeeding her child. Ayam had a very amused look on her face. They turned away, giving her some privacy. Taliah had a red face, while Naruto was just grinning away. Not at Ayam breastfeeding, but at his girlfriend's embarrassment. Naruto poked Taliah's side playfully, getting a jolt in return. Naruto rubbed his side with a groan. "Hey! I'm not ready for shock play yet," Taliah responded to that by stomping on his foot. "So worth it." Kushina was having an interesting day on the mountainside palace of the gods. Persephone had given her the afternoon off, considering she was stuck with her mother. Finding gratitude in that, Kushina let herself wander around Olympus. She stopped to catch the latest gossip from some nymphs, all of who commented on how unlucky she was. Wondering what the immortal spirits had meant, she inquired, only getting amused laughs. Taking a wild guess, Kushina decided to go pay a certain blue-eyed idiot a visit and prove the spirits wrong. Apollo's temple was gleaming as it were expected to, a shrine to her husband's ego that had her shaking her head in exasperation. She looked up at the golden doors that were so blindingly bright that her purple eyes squinted before pushing them open. If anything, it got brighter, a lot brighter. Kushina had to hold her hand up to shield her eyes as she entered. The door closed behind her and there was some strumming that melted her heart. It suddenly stopped and she heard Apollo mumble to himself. With the stealth she had obtained through her career as a kunoichi, Kushina was able to slip up behind the young-looking man that was hunched over a desk, an acoustic guitar in his lap while he wrote on a sheet of paper. "G minor here." Apollo hummed to himself and turned the pencil in his hand around, erasing the mark he made. "Not a flat, a sharp." "Boo," Kushina said. She smirked as Apollo let out a rather unmanly shriek. While the god of the sun was trying to stop his beating whatever gods had, Kushina looked over the papers on the desk. "Must be easier to write than making seals. No wonder your handwriting was so much better than mine, girly boy." "I am not girly," Apollo said indignantly. He shone for a moment before he had regained the face she had fallen for many years ago and gave her a smirk. "I'm just prettier than you." I still don't know if I should be insulted by that or not, Kushina said. She leaned back and crossed her arms over her chest. So, what was with the other face? Apollo shrugged. I get bored. I like to switch it up every now and then. Maybe you should do it again so you don't look so girly. I'm not girly. You are so girly. Humph, see if I ever compliment you again. Apollo stuck his chin in the air and spun his chair around. Kushina draped herself over his shoulders, giving him a playful pout. Never compliment my eyes again? She asked. Nope. Or my lips. Not happening. Not even my hair. Apollo bit on his lip a bit. He did like Kushina's hair. It was an alluring shade of red he had never seen on anyone else. Sure, he's had his share of redheads, but Kushina's hair was like rubies come to life. It demanded his attention, and things that got his attention never stopped getting his attention. Maybe. Damn inability to lie. Judging by the smile on Kushina's face, he knew that she knew that he was cursing his hindrance. It was usually why he couldn't win an argument with her back when he was mortal. Resigning to his fate, Apollo looked at his wife with a smile. Not that I'm not happy you're here, Kushi-chan, but why are you here? Kushina huffed and went limp, literally hanging over his shoulders. A bunch of nymphs were pitying me for being married to you. Ah, they're just jealous that you married me. Apollo smirked at his wife. I mean, who wouldn't want to marry me? Your mother, sister and aunt, touché. Apollo turned around and pulled Kushina to sit on his lap with a grin on his face. But then again, Arte is my lil sis, and mom, well she's mom. The only one I did want to marry was Auntie Hestia and I'm so over her. And Daphne? Kushina asked, arching a brow. I got that damn arrow removed a few centuries ago, Apollo said. He sighed. Won't lie though, she was a pretty nymph. Poor Apollo, heartbroken at the ripe old age of, how old were you when that happened again? Kushina asked with a smirk. That would be telling. Apollo poked her nose. And while I can't lie, I won't tell you how old I am. I already feel like a cradle robber enough as it is. Stole my heart when I was only 10, Kushina said, making him chuckle sheepishly. Let's keep that between ourselves, Apollo said. The last thing I need is Arte having a good reason to shoot an arrow between my ears. I mean, sure I'll heal, but the pain. And the last thing you need is pain, Kushina said. She looked over at the large wall of pictures and smiled. You know, if there's any more pictures added to that wall I will castrate you. Again, Apollo swallowed. Yes, I know. You made that quite clear. A few months after her resurrection, Kushina had learned through a reliable source that Apollo was working his moves on a girl, but before the deal was sold she appeared in a blaze of hellfire. What had followed included the worst pain imaginable that Apollo had ever dealt with. Even more than anything he had felt during the Gigantomachy. Apollo swore on the sticks that he would never put himself through that sort of pain ever again. Kushina got up from her seat and went over to the wall, grabbing a few of the pictures on the bottom row. Who are they? My youngest batch. Apollo got up and went to her side, gently taking one to look at. It was a young girl with dark skin and she had blue eyes much like his. This is Lyric, she's 6 right now. Her birthday was a few months ago. She's cute, Kushina said with a smile. What's her mother do? Dances. Kushina closed her eyes and took a deep breath before looking at her husband expectantly. Ballet or exotic? Ballet, Apollo said, smiling lightly as he hung the picture back up. They're the last. I promise. Well, maybe with other women. Kushina looked at the other pictures in her hand. Who's this one? Richard Grayson. Apollo grinned proudly at the name. His mom's a librarian. Really? You still read? Kushina smirked at him. Funny. Apollo took the photo of the blonde boy and hung it back up. He looked at the last one in Kushina's hand. That's the youngest of them all. Liam Antiman. I met his mom at a college party about 6 years back, a few months after Lyric's mom gave birth. I won't lie, they're adorable children. I wouldn't have minded if they were mine, Kushina said, making Apollo beam. She hung the photo back up and looked up a few rows before grabbing the photo she adored the most. Though I wouldn't trade anything for this one. Apollo laughed and smiled at the picture of Naruto sleeping in his penthouse bed, sprawled out with his mouth wide open. He's got your temper. You wish. Kushina snorted in amusement. How's he holding up? Apollo asked. Since, you know, not as well as he makes it seem. He's trying to be brave for everyone, Kushina said. She traced Naruto's face and smiled sadly. I remember the first time I saw him. It's hard to forget it. Apollo wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They had both died for Naruto, impaled through the back by the nine-tailed fox's claw as it tried to kill their newborn son. The moment Apollo got that memory back, he locked himself away in his temple and stayed there for a day. Thank goodness it was a stormy day then, otherwise Zeus would have come demanding why he was shirking his duties. I knew he was going to be special, Kushina said with a small smile. I wish I had seen him, before he had grown up. Apollo put his other hand on the frame and it shifted, like a book turning the pages back until it landed on the oldest photograph of Naruto that existed in the world. As the god of the arts, he had a small control over photography and could make copies of any picture that existed in the world. The image showed a 4-year-old Naruto in a white shirt and black shorts standing in front of the Hokage monument. Next to him an elderly man with red and white robes had his hand on Naruto's head. That's the oldest picture I have, Apollo said softly. He's adorable, Kushina said breathlessly. Tears built up in Kushina's eyes as a slideshow began. She watched Naruto age before her eyes, cooing over his childish cuteness between ages 4 and 10, beaming in pride at him sitting next to 18 empty ramen bowls with a sobbing Irika in the background, laughing at his first graduate genin photo where he had painted his hands and face white with red lines over it. Then it was a photo of Naruto glaring at the annoyed Sasuke. Between them was a smiling Sakura and behind them, his hands on either of the boys' heads, was Kakashi. The next photo included a white-haired man with red lines coming down from under each of his eyes, Tsunade and Shizen standing behind a grinning Naruto holding up a bandaged fist at the camera. Another picture showed Naruto in a hospital bed with a beautiful woman kissing his cheek. Scrawled on it in red ink was, "Get better soon, hero of spring, Yuki." The photo after that was Naruto and the same white-haired man, only Naruto looked like he was probably 14. They continued, showing Naruto up until he was taken from Konoha. Then the next one that appeared was one of Naruto, another blonde boy, a younger Taliah and a much younger Annabeth all crammed into a small box making faces at the camera. The next picture showed Naruto post-revival, sitting in a small restaurant with a green-eyed blonde hanging onto his arm. Who's that? Kushina asked, arching a brow. Naruto's first girlfriend, or would she technically be the second? Apollo tapped his chin in thought before shrugging it off. Anyway, she was a girl Naruto met at a coffee shop. They had a cute relationship for about 3 months before he had to leave. A Cyclops found him. At least he's happy now, Kushina said. Hopefully he gave her a good reason. Yeah, good. Apollo said with a nervous laugh. His wife, so surreal to think that about any woman, turned to give him a glare and Apollo swallowed. He may have left with a note. I'm going to ground him. How was he supposed to cover up a monster attack? Apollo asked. He couldn't use the mist all that well, then. He should have let her think he was crazy. Well, being the god of medicine, I don't want to tell you this, but, oh, no. Yeah. Apollo scratched the back of his neck. I talked with D about it and, well, it seems Naruto is legitimately insane. Post-traumatic? Recognized it, huh? I figured. Kushina swiped the picture and it returned to the end, back to the picture of Naruto sleeping in bed. When he woke up that night, it was like looking at some of the unfortunate shinobi after the Third War. Like Hitaki, Apollo said. He sighed. Poor Obito, I haven't thought about him or Rin in years. And Rin was gorgeous as a teen. Kushina elbowed him in the side before she hung the picture of Naruto back up. She hugged her arms with a frown for a moment before beaming. I know that look. That's the look that got us gate guarding for a month when you stuffed rotten fish in the shopkeeper's bed and took credit for it, Apollo said. Let's go visit Konoha. Kushina grinned at him. It'll be fun. Pop in, scare a few civilians, give Tsunade a heart attack. I don't know. I thought you were the fun twin. I am. I just might be in a bit of hot water with Zeus. Apollo scratched the back of his neck nervously. You know what with our son dating his daughter. So just because they had sex once he's mad at you? Kushina rolled her eyes. Please, you and I did it all the time. Like that time we did it on Hiruzen's. Apollo had a finger to his lips and looked around worriedly. If Aphrodite finds out I ever did something like that, no one will trust me in their temple ever again. Really? Kushina predatorily smirked at him. Yes. It'll be like Uncle Poseidon and Athena all over again, but with me who's banned from visiting Athens for a few centuries, Apollo said. So please, Kushi-chan, don't tell anyone that story. Well, now that you say not to. Apollo was torn between quivering in fear of the gleam in her eye and smiling at her mischievous side. He decided to go with the third option and just accept her original request. Zeus had nothing on a scary Kushina. Well, there was the master bolt, but that was nothing compared to a wife's ability to instill fear in her husband. His head hung in defeat, Apollo sighed before righting himself and beaming a grin at his wife. Alright, let's go. I knew you'd see it my way, Kushina said, wrapping her arms around his. Whiskers, take the blindfold off my face, damn it. Talia's eyes crackled and the fabric started to burn. Naruto decided he wanted to walk around the village, showing Talia his favorite places to hang out. She met two off-duty chunin, and Talia was rather proud that she got the name of the rank right, named Kotetsu and Izumo. They were a rather lively bunch, glad to see their lil buddy was alive and well with a pretty new friend, getting a protective glare from Naruto. They were sad he wasn't a Konohan shinobi anymore, but were relieved when he said he was a ranking officer in the alliance. After that meeting, Naruto convinced Talia to let him surprise her with something. Hey! No peeking Lia-chan, Naruto said. He squeezed Talia's hand and she knew he smiled at her, despite the fact she couldn't see it. Talia followed her boyfriend's instructions, her hand squeezing back around his as he led her up some stairs. They climbed for a long time and Talia felt her gut twisting and churning. How far up are we? Talia asked. She cursed herself for the light stutter, but being unable to see while feeling the pull of gravity on her body. Trust me, Lia-chan. I won't let you fall, Naruto said. He continued to lead her up the steps, her grip tightening the further they went up. Finally, Naruto came to a stop, his hand still holding hers tightly. Okay, you can take it off now. Talia took her blindfold off and regretted it. Are we on top of the mountain? Yes, Naruto said. He turned Talia to look at him, his hands on her shoulders firmly to keep her from bolting. Lia-chan, I didn't bring you up here to have you try and fly or something, I just want you to look at the village. Why? Talia asked. Naruto gave her a small smile and she sighed. Talia took a deep breath, planning to sock Naruto hard if she puked, and turned to look at the village. Instead of an overwhelming feeling of fear and height, Talia looked out at every building to the walls that surrounded it and her mouth gaped just a little. I think I know why. This is why I became a shinobi, Naruto said, standing next to her and putting his hand around hers again. His jaw clenched for a moment before relaxing. My surrogate grandfather, the Sandaime Hokage, he brought me up here all the time when I was little. Because I hated everyone in the village, just as they hated me. Talia gave a start at that, looking at her boyfriend in surprise. What? I didn't know who I was, why I was hated, or why I existed, Naruto said. He took a deep breath and smiled serenely. But then Gigi, that is, the Sandaime, brought me up here to overlook the village. Naruto looked at Talia, his smile still plastered on his face. He told me I had to be stronger than the villagers, to overcome my hatred. He said it is the duty of Konoha to spread the will of fire, and that includes everyone in it, shinobi or not. Hating the rest of the village would hinder that duty, and as much as I hated the people, I never hated the village itself. What's the will of fire? Talia asked. It's the belief that through bonds, peace will sprout anew, Naruto said with a smirk. Love being the key to peace, as corny as it sounds to you, is one of the things I believe in. The gods may be real and other religions may be wrong for all we know, but my true loyalty lies to the will of fire and spreading its message. We're about to go into war, Talia said. Naruto's hand squeezed around hers gently and she squeezed back. I know, he said. And I know that I may hate Luke now, that I will kill him if need be, but I will forgive him and let him rest when it is all over. I will never stop believing in the will of fire. Fire will burn where the leaves dance. The shadow of the fire will light the village and the leaves will sprout again. Naruto smiled as the sun started to set behind them, his shadow casting over a portion of the village. A saying Hokage Gigi used to tell me, that the Hokage was the protector of the leaves from the fires of war. I don't want to live here, Talia. It's a war-driven village, the peace you saw as we walked through it was a mask over an ugly and scarred face. But it's still your home. The two demigods turned to see Kushina and Apollo watching them, and their hands fell away from each other. Kushina smiled at her son. Sochi, you don't want to admit it, but you still love Konoha. It's okay to be honest with us, Apollo said, grinning at Naruto. I may be the god of truths, but I can keep secrets, too. Yes. I still love Konoha, Naruto said. He turned and looked back at the village. But I can't be here. Not now. I can't do what Hokage Gigi asked me, not yet. The people of this village don't deserve a Hokage like you, Apollo said. Naruto turned back to face him and he smiled secretly. They never will. Taliah looked between the three, confused as they all had small smiles on their faces. So what aren't you all saying that's going over my head? That, Taliah-chan, is a secret. Naruto said, turning back to look at the village. Taliah frowned and started to open her mouth, but was stopped when Kushina threw an arm over her shoulders, startling the daughter of Zeus. Apollo stood beside his son, his hands in his jean pockets while Naruto crossed his arms. The sun's light shone behind them and their shadows encased the whole village from where they stood on the Sandame's head as the day came to a close. That's it for part 16. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.